Chapter 316. On the long street, raindrops mixed with blood flowed like a river, bringing endless fear to everyone. Wherever Chu Xiu went, almost no one under the three-flower realm could withstand a single strike from his blade. Anyone who touched it would die. However, the problem was that it was useless even if they wanted to escape. Wherever Lin Nani went, Chu Xiu would follow. At this moment, everyone present wished that they could skin Lin Nani alive. Previously, this old fox had spoken vehemently and passionately, as if he wanted to fight Chu Xiu to the death. In the end, he was forced to flee in all directions by Chu Xiu. However, the problem was that Lin Nani was cunning. He ran to places with a lot of people, and used them to help him resist Chu Xiu. It was true that he couldn't outrun Chu Xiu, but it was fine as long as he could outrun the others. His intentions were extremely sinister. Right at this moment, a ray of sword light shot out from midair. The sword light was very small, but it had boundless sharpness. It was as if nothing could resist that sword light. The moment the sword light fell, Chu Xiu was suddenly alarmed. He gave up on chasing Lin Nani and raised the heavenly demon dance in his hand. With a slash, the blood-refined divine power and the Avicii demonic chi fused together and sprayed towards the sword light. However, the seemingly inconspicuous sword light instantly defeated Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine power and the Avicii demonic chi. It slashed on Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance, making a loud clang. Chu Xiu immediately took a few steps back, and the hand holding the sword was already trembling. A figure fell from midair and stood in front of Chu Xiu. His face was cold, and he held a sword with one hand. However, the sword was extremely strange. It was a thin sword. The blade was small and narrow, not even half the width of a normal long sword. It looked beautiful, like a sword used by a woman. Of course, the most important thing was that the person in front of him was actually at the oneness of heaven and human realm. He was an expert at the oneness of heaven and human realm in his prime. Seeing the appearance of this oneness of heaven and human realm warrior, everyone present was stunned. Under normal circumstances, there shouldn't be an expert at the oneness of heaven and human realm here. The reason was simple. The strongest of the Jiangdong Five was only at the Five Chi's origin realm. How could an expert at the oneness of heaven and human realm owe the Jiangdong Five a favor? However, at this moment, someone guessed the identity of the person in front of them and couldn't help but exclaim, "It's the Yu Maiden Palace disciple, Feng Wuling." Chu Xiu raised his head when he heard this. He had heard of this person before him. He should have known this person before. He should have been the only male disciple in the Yu Maiden Palace. The Yu Maiden Palace was one of the 5 great sword sects of the 5-sword heaven-splitting sword sect. It was also the only sword sect of the 5 great sword sects that was entirely female. It was said that the founder of the Yu Maiden Palace was a woman from the land of Wuyue in ancient times, which was the generation around the Wu County Luo clan. This woman didn't have a master, but her swordsmanship was natural. It was said that it was a gift from the heavens. She once used a bamboo pole as a sword to defeat many experts in the Jianghu. She was listed as one of the strongest swordsmanship masters in the Jianghu. She didn't leave her name, so people just called her Yu Maiden. Yu Nu didn't have a disciple. She only gave a few pointers to a little girl who was being bullied before leaving, her whereabouts unknown. After that little girl grew up, she made a name for herself in Jianghu and established the Yu Nu Palace, which eventually became one of the 5 great sword sections. The story of the Yu Maiden Palace was mysterious, and there was even a hint of a legend in it. However, the swordsmanship of the Yu Maiden Palace was indeed mystical. This was because Yu Maiden didn't leave behind a complete inheritance. The current Yu Maiden sword manual was written by the little girl after she became a martial Dao grandmaster. She used the swordsmanship left behind by Yu Maiden, as well as her own accumulation of swordsmanship as a foundation. Later generations of the Yu Maiden Palace's swordsmanship experts also perfected it one by one. This resulted in a special characteristic of the Yu Maiden Palace's martial artists. The strong were very strong, and the mediocre were mediocre. Those experts had comprehended the true essence of the Yu Maiden sword manual, the sword Dao left behind by the ancient sword Dao grandmaster Yu Maiden. That was why they had powerful swordsmanship cultivation. On the other hand, those mediocre martial artists comprehended the surface of the Yu Maiden sword manual. It was something added by the later generations of the Umaiden Palace's martial artists. Although it couldn't be said to be weak, it was still inferior to the essence of the Umaiden sword manual and the other sects' inheritance techniques. Because of this, the position of the Umaiden Palace among the 5 major sword sects was very unstable. It was sometimes at the top and sometimes at the bottom. Now the Umaiden Palace was in a period of decline, and was at the bottom of the 5 major sword sections. The background of Feng Wuling was also very interesting. The Umaiden Palace didn't accept male disciples, but he was the only male disciple of the Umaiden Palace. To be precise, he wasn't a disciple because the Umaiden Palace had never acknowledged him. Instead, they hunted him down everywhere, wanting to take back his martial arts. The disciples of the Umaiden Palace weren't allowed to marry. As long as they joined the Umaiden Palace, they would be a member of the Umaiden Palace for life. They only had swordsmanship in their lives. However, more than 10 years ago, a female disciple of the Umaiden Palace accidentally fell in love with an itinerant warrior and eloped with him. She even taught him the Umaiden sword manual of the Umaiden Palace. This person was Feng Wuling. Of course, the Umaiden Palace wouldn't ignore such a violation of sect rules. They sent disciples to kill the 2 of them and told the female disciple that as long as she was willing to return to the Umaiden Palace, they wouldn't cripple her martial arts. They would only imprison her, but Feng Wuling had to die. The final outcome of this matter was that the female disciple of the Umaiden Palace wasn't willing to completely break off relations with her sect. However, she wasn't willing to let Feng Wuling die either. Hence, she committed suicide and Feng Wuling became a wanderer. This matter caused an uproar back then, so Feng Wuling was very famous. Everyone thought that he had been secretly killed by the Umaiden Palace. No one expected him to appear here. Chu Xiu looked at Feng Wuling and said with narrowed eyes, "I have no enmity with you. For you to appear here, I'm afraid the person behind you can't take it anymore, and is preparing to use his own strength to kill me. You've been chased by the Umaiden Palace for so many years, but you haven't appeared in the underworld for the past few years. There isn't even a trace of you. Clearly, someone is protecting you. Furthermore, looking at your aura, it's much stronger than when you were being chased. Clearly, you haven't stopped cultivating during this period of time. To be able to hide from the Umaiden Palace and protect you, and even give you so many cultivation resources, it seems like the person behind you is quite powerful." Chu Xiu's words caused everyone present to look at each other in dismay. Could it really be like what they had said before, that this matter was instigated by someone? Not only were the hot-blooded people who wanted to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, but there were also people who were here to watch the show. These people were very rational. After hearing Chu Xiu's words, their instincts told them that something was wrong, especially when Feng Wuling appeared. It was obvious that there was a conspiracy behind this matter. Feng Wuling said with an expressionless face, "I have no enmity with you, but I have taken someone's money to get rid of trouble. If someone wants to kill you, I can only use my sword. This is how the underworld works." When he was young, Feng Wuling was also a hot-blooded hero of the underworld. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen in love with a disciple of the Umaiden Palace, and even betrayed her sect to be with him. But now, after being chased by the Umaiden Palace for so many years, Feng Wuling's blood had long turned cold, and his heart had long died. He had seen countless cruel things in the underworld. Now Feng Wuling was just a sword that killed. Xiahou Wujiang could protect him from being found by the Umaiden Palace, and provide him with cultivation resources. Therefore, he could kill for Xiahou Wujiang. Feng Wuling raised the thin sword in his hand. The sword in his hand was the Umaiden sword, a special weapon of the Umaiden Palace. It was long and slender like a bamboo pole. It was meant to imitate the bamboo pole that the Umaiden used to defeat all the experts in the world. Similarly, the Umaiden sword in Feng Wuling's hand was also the last memory left to him by his former lover. The sword light rose, and the wind and clouds broke. In an instant, the resplendent sword light condensed into a single point. The surroundings were silent, and when the sword landed, there wasn't even a sound of breaking through the air. But in an instant, it had already arrived in front of Chu Xiu. The sword arts of the Umaiden Palace were the strangest sword arts in the world. If one couldn't comprehend the core of the Yu Maiden Sword Manual, then the sword arts of the Yu Maiden Palace could only be considered mediocre. It was similar to the Ba Mountain Sword Sect and Azure Water Sword Sect, which cultivated sword arts, but were unable to reach the pinnacle of swordsmen. However, if one could truly comprehend the essence and true meaning of the Yu Maiden Sword Mantra, the might would surpass one's imagination. The simple sword moves were natural and seemed ordinary, but each move was a powerful, unparalleled sword technique. There were thousands of disciples in the Yu Maiden Palace, but less than 1 in 100 could truly comprehend the essence of the Yu Maiden Sword Manual. Even when the Yu Maiden Palace was at its peak, there were only 100 of them. Feng Wuling's lover actually didn't comprehend the essence of the Yu Maiden Sword Manual. Instead, it was Feng Wuling, the man who had comprehended it. To the Yu Maiden Palace, this could be considered a form of irony. That was why the Yu Maiden Palace paid such a huge price to hunt him down, not only because he fell in love with a female disciple of the Yu Maiden Palace, but also because he had learned the Yu Maiden Sword Manual and comprehended its essence. This was something that the Yu Maiden Palace couldn't tolerate. And now, when faced with Feng Wuling's sword, Chu Xiu, who bore the brunt of the attack, immediately felt an immense pressure. Right now, Chu Xiu was in between the 3-flower realm and the 5 cheese collecting in the origin realm. However, it wasn't that easy to break through, but his combat strength had already surpassed the 3-flower realm. Regular 5 cheese collecting in the origin realm were no match for him. Only martial artists at the level of Cheng Buhui could fight him, but against an existence at the unity of heaven and man realm, the gap in between was still not that easy to overcome. If the difference between the 3-flower realm and the 5 cheese collecting in the origin realm was like a small stream that could be crossed by those with long legs, then the difference between the 5 cheese collecting in the origin realm and the unity of heaven and man realm was like a huge river. Even swimming might not be able to cross it. Chapter 317. The 5 tiers of Qi controlling were divided into 3 levels. Internal and physical invulnerability were 1 level, while the 3 flowers and 5 Qis were another level. The final unity of heaven and man was a separate level. The fact that this level could be ranked as a separate level was already enough to prove the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm. Feng Wuling's sword strike was extremely simple. The gleaming sword strike was natural, as though the surrounding wind was avoiding him and accelerating the flow of this sword strike. Some people said that the Yu Maiden swordsmanship of the Yu Maiden Palace wasn't created by humans, but was a gift from the heavens. Almost everyone treated this as a joke. However, now that Chu Xiu had to bear the brunt of the Yu Maiden swordsmanship, he knew that it wasn't a joke. Chu Xiu formed the Wisdom Fist seal with his Gang Qi, covering heaven and earth. Feng Wuling's sword began to stagnate, as though it had pierced into a pool of water. However, at this moment his wrist shook gently, and the thin sword moved. Layers of sword aura rippled out, like raindrops falling into a pond, bringing about layers of ripples. It seemed like a gentle breeze, but it completely shattered the Gang Qi field that Chu Xiu's Wisdom Fist seal had set up. Although the Wisdom Fist seal couldn't stop Feng Wuling's sword, Chu Xiu had already slashed out with the demonic dance. The last move of the 3 blades of Avicii shone with boundless demonic aura from hell and bloomed. It collided with Feng Wuling's sword, and a terrifying power erupted. On Chu Xiu's side, his blood and qi soared into the sky, and the demonic flames were monstrous. He looked extremely powerful. Even the 3 flowers and 5 qi's origin realm couldn't compare to Chu Xiu's power. On the other side, Feng Wuling had casually stabbed out with his sword. Even the sword qi was not that powerful. The clash between the blade and sword, which seemed to be of great disparity, produced a loud bang. The ground beneath Chu Xiu's feet shattered inch by inch, and he could not help but retreat. Both the demonic aura and the blood-refined divine power had been shattered by Feng Wuling's sword. On the other hand, Feng Wuling was standing on the same spot, not moving an inch. With just one move, it was obvious who was stronger. Facing Feng Wuling, Chu Xiu was still at a disadvantage despite using all his strength. Facing Feng Wuling, Chu Xiu was still at a disadvantage despite using all his strength. He had not seen many unity of heaven and man realm martial artists. The strongest among them should be Phaseless Demon Sect's Mr. Lu and Azure Dragon Society's Heavenly Sim branch leader. Feng Wuling hadn't reached the unity of heaven and man realm for as long as either of them, so he wasn't much stronger than them. However, he wasn't much weaker than them. At the very least, he was much stronger than Han Dongel, the hanger-on of King and Lu, who died in the hands of Mr. Lu. In particular, Feng Wuling's maiden swordsmanship was simply unfathomable. The sword's momentum was natural, and while the power seemed ordinary, it was all-encompassing when he attacked. In terms of power, he crushed Chu Xiu in all aspects. Feng Wuling said, "You're strong to be able to block my sword while you're only at the three-flower realm. What a pity." Feng Wuling didn't say what he thought was a pity, but everyone knew that Chu Xiu was still going to die today. Facing the unity of heaven and man realm at the unity of heaven and man realm wasn't as simple as a difference of two realms. Lin Nani, who was hiding on the side, wiped the cold sweat off his head. He was glad that he was still alive. At the same time, he was cursing Xiahou Wujiang in his heart. He clearly had Feng Wuling as his trump card, so why did he ask them to come? Anyway, Feng Wuling had been hunted down by the Maiden Palace for so long. If he killed Chu Xiu now, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to be hunted down by the Guanzhong torture room. Lin Nani didn't know that Xiahou Wujiang had been using them from the beginning. Why would he let his own people do something that outsiders could do? At that moment in the arena, Feng Wuling stabbed out with the Maiden sword one after another. Every move was extremely simple. In the eyes of outsiders, it was such a simple stab. There were no changes in the flow of energy, nor was there an explosion of vigor. It was simply like child's play. How could this be called a sword technique? However, it was precisely this kind of childish sword technique that contained heaven and earth with every slash. It was graceful and free, completely suppressing Chu Xiu in terms of power. Another sword descended. The slender Maiden sword was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, and the sword aura was like an antelope hanging its horns, making it hard to grasp. Chu Xiu slashed out with the demonic dance in his hand. However, the powerful blood-refined divine shield and demonic aura couldn't block this slash. He was sent flying for over 10 steps, and the arm that held the saber was already bleeding. "It's over." Feng Wuling's voice was indifferent. His figure seemed to be hidden between heaven and earth. As he stabbed out with his sword, his body became one with heaven and earth. The wind that blew around him and the raindrops that fell from the sky all condensed into a sword and slashed at Chu Xiu. The Maiden sword mantra was a gift from the heavens. The sword's momentum was naturally formed, and there were no fixed moves. The amount of power that could be unleashed depended entirely on the depth of one's understanding of the sword, and the depth of one's understanding of heaven and earth. In the past, Maiden could defeat all the experts in the world with a bamboo pole. The bamboo pole was a sword in her hand, and the wind and clouds in her hand were also swords. The disciples of the Maiden Palace couldn't reach such a level, and Feng Wuling naturally couldn't either. However, he temporarily integrated his sword into heaven and earth, allowing everything around him to condense power for his sword. Such a level of comprehension was rare even in the Maiden Palace. A strong murderous intent flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. A blood mist condensed around him as he burned his vital energy and blood. The power of vital energy and blood condensed the murderous intent around him. At this instant, Chu Xiu punched out with a murderous intent that soared into the sky. There was no heaven and earth. Annihilating sky and earth, annihilating oblivion, killing fist. The strength condensed by this punch was even several times stronger than the punch Chu Xiu had used to kill Yao Leshan earlier. He'd discarded all his thoughts and obsessions and stepped into a true state of oblivion. And the might of this punch was sufficient to make everyone take notice of him. Disregarding life and death, there was only the word kill in his mind. This was the true oblivion-killing punch of heaven and earth. The powerful fist intent tore the heavens and earth. If Feng Wuling's sword borrowed the power of heaven and earth, then Chu Xiu's punch tore the heavens and earth with his murderous intent. During the collision, the earth energy was shattered and the gale was torn apart. Even the raindrops evaporated into mist during the exchange between Chu Xiu and Feng Wuling. Chu Xiu's fist collided with the edge of the sword, and a stream of blood spurted out. The stellar energy on Chu Xiu's right arm was torn apart, and the sword wound extended from his fist to his shoulder. Chu Xiu's figure brushed past Feng Wuling's shoulder, and he stood over 100 feet behind Feng Wuling. Fresh blood flowed down his arm, and the killing intent in his eyes disappeared. However, his face was frighteningly pale. This could be said to be the most serious injury that Chu Xiu had ever suffered. His arm was almost crippled by Feng Wuling's sword. On the other side, Feng Wuling revealed a look of shock. He touched his chest, and a stream of blood flowed out from his mouth. The power of Chu Xiu's punch had actually been neutralized by his sword. However, there was one thing that couldn't be neutralized: the murderous intent that Chu Xiu had condensed. The murderous intent that entered his body was as cold as a blade, cutting his internal organs. However, it didn't matter. Murderous intent alone couldn't kill someone. The surrounding people were also dumbfounded. They looked at Chu Xiu as though they were looking at a monster. Although Chu Xiu had been defeated in the previous exchange, and he was severely injured by Feng Wuling's sword, he was almost crippled. However, Feng Wuling had actually been injured by Chu Xiu. One had to know that Feng Wuling was an expert at the oneness of heaven and man realm. Yet he was injured while fighting with Chu Xiu, a warrior at the Three-Flower realm. What kind of concept was this? Perhaps it existed in the pugilistic world, but at least the people present had never heard of it. Feng Wuling wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and raised his sword. Just as he was about to attack, a crazy murderous intent suddenly appeared in his eyes. He was no longer as calm as before. He shouted at Chu Xiu angrily, "You deserve to die." A crack suddenly appeared on his maiden sword, extending from the tip to the hilt. Although Chu Xiu's desperate attack by burning his blood essence couldn't kill an expert at the oneness of heaven and man realm, it wasn't that easy to resist. The murderous intent was like a blade. Although Feng Wuling's maiden sword was a fifth transformation precious weapon, it couldn't withstand such a powerful force. Hence, cracks appeared on it. Before this, Feng Wuling's attitude toward Chu Xiu was very indifferent because he had no enmity with Chu Xiu. He only killed Chu Xiu because it was a mission. He was Xiahou Wujiang's sword. Xiahou Wujiang had protected him for so many years, so he could kill whoever he wanted him to kill. However, the sword that his former lover had left for him, which was also the sword that he had entrusted all his heart to, had cracked from a punch from Chu Xiu. This made Feng Wuling furious, and he really wanted to kill Chu Xiu. The sword light flowed, and the originally calm sword aura revealed a hint of ferocious killing intent. As Feng Wuling stabbed out with his sword, the surrounding wind and rain froze and scattered to the sides along with the blade of the sword. It was as though they were opening up a path for Feng Wuling's sword. The enraged Feng Wuling attacked with all his might, and his power was several times stronger than before. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu seemed to have sensed something. He took a step forward, and the aura around him became extremely mysterious. The surrounding raindrops fell, and the gentle breeze seemed to have some kind of rhythm. It was displayed in the most direct state in front of Chu Xiu. Those who were observing Chu Xiu suddenly realized that Chu Xiu's current state was very strange. He seemed to have become one with heaven and earth, but he was like a bystander, watching the movement of heaven and earth. That indistinct state made people feel very stifled. Some people even felt a little uncomfortable just by looking at him. Heaven's sun gazing at air. It was unknown whether it was a sudden epiphany or the immense pressure between life and death, but the heaven's sun gazing at air that Chu Xiu had been painstakingly searching for, but was unable to get to the beginner level actually made a breakthrough at this moment. Although it was only the beginner level, he could still use it with some difficulty. At this moment, in Chu Xiu's eyes, Feng Wuling seemed to be surrounded by threads. These threads were twisting, and they were the trajectory of Feng Wuling's attack. Looking at the sky, as long as he could find a loophole, Chu Xiu would still have a chance. Chapter 318. Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air was just a beginner's level. Naturally, he couldn't reach the great mastery level of the heaven's sun gazing at air's ability to predict heaven's secrets, which was comparable to the power of ghosts and gods. However, even if it was just a beginner's level, it was enough for Chu Xiu. Feng Wuling was indeed very powerful. Even under Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, his sword aura was almost invulnerable. The natural maiden swordplay could be said to be a sword technique with the least flaws. It was a sword bestowed by the heavens. If one wanted to find its flaws, they would have to find the flaws of the entire world. Although there were no flaws in the sword technique, there were flaws in the person. Previously, Chu Xiu accidentally cracked the Yu sword in Feng Wuling's hand, causing him to lose his cool and fall into a violent rage. This was Feng Wuling's flaw, the flaw in his state of mind. The blade of the sword tore through the sky. Under that powerful might, the wind and rain were torn apart. The aura on Chu Xiu's body fluctuated. In Chu Xiu's eyes, lines condensed into Feng Wuling's trajectory. Even the vital energy around his body was constantly changing, reflecting in Chu Xiu's eyes. Now that Chu Xiu was severely injured, there was only one chance. Feng Wuling would die if he grasped that flaw. If he failed, Chu Xiu would die. Among those twisting lines, the anger and murderous intent in Feng Wuling's heart caused the center of his sword force to be the most unstable. At the moment when one of the lines twisted, Chu Xiu also made his move. His right arm was severely injured. With his left hand holding the blade, monstrous demonic aura condensed on the blade. The blood-refined divine shield was condensed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. His body took the initiative to collide with Feng Wuling. Everyone was stunned when they saw the scene. Could it be that Chu Xiu had gone mad? Was he sending himself to his death? However, the next scene was beyond their imagination. Chu Xiu's blade collided with Feng Wuling's sword. The blade slashed out at an extremely tricky angle. All the demonic aura gathered at one point and exploded. The Yu sword in Feng Wuling's hand suddenly shattered. No! Feng Wuling roared furiously, his eyes filled with endless madness. The Yu sword was the only remembrance left to him by his lover, as well as the only thing he could entrust his heart to. Now that it had been destroyed by Chu Xiu, he instantly fell into a frenzy. Although it was the same sword force of the Yu sword, it was filled with endless anger and murderous intent. Although it was the same sword force as the Yu sword, it was Chu and Feng Wuling and Chu Xiu sword. With a Feng Xiu and Xiu Feng and blood Shan Feng, and in blood Feng Chu Xiu Shan and Feng S, and Chu Wu Feng's Zai's Chen and Chu Xiu Feng. Chu Chen Chu Wu Xiuling. Xiu. The arena was silent. A bloody hole appeared under Chu Xiu's ribs, and fresh blood was flowing out slowly. At the critical moment, Chu Xiu had used the Heaven's Sun Gazing at Air spell to predict Feng Wuling's attack trajectory. He had forcefully shifted his position, and condensed his chi of vigor. Therefore, only a bloody hole had appeared under his ribs. Otherwise, Feng Wuling's attack would have completely shattered Chu Xiu's heart. However, when they looked at Feng Wuling's side, everyone present gasped in shock. Feng Wuling stood on the spot with a pale face, and there was a bloody wound on his neck. Feng Wuling lifted his head, and a look of relief appeared in his eyes. Just as he was about to say something, fresh blood spurted out from his neck, and his body fell to the ground. Chu Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. He had won this round, but it was a fluke. The Heaven's Sun Gazing at Air spell could only give Chu Xiu a chance. Whether or not Chu Xiu could grasp this opportunity depended on himself. Just now he had used all his strength. After using the Heaven's Sun Gazing at Air spell to identify Feng Wuling's loophole, he finally shattered Feng Wuling's chi of vigor with one slash, and the edge of his blade had narrowly slid across Feng Wuling's neck. He was really very lucky in this battle. In all fairness, Feng Wuling was very strong. If Chu Xiu had not managed to create a crack on his Yu sword, causing Feng Wuling to be enraged, Chu Xiu would not have been able to find his loophole. By the time Chu Xiu completely shattered Feng Wuling's Yu sword, Feng Wuling had already descended into madness. As a martial artist who had lost his mind, he was full of loopholes. The only difference was whether or not Chu Xiu could successfully grasp this loophole. Chu Xiu did not see Feng Wuling's final gaze. In fact, Feng Wuling's heart had already died after his lover committed suicide. Feng Wuling was just a walking corpse who only knew how to think about the past. Although he was not afraid of death, he did not have the motivation to live. Now that Chu Xiu had killed him, Feng Wuling could actually be considered a release for him. At this moment, Feng Wuling's death made everyone present fall silent. What did they just see? Chu Xiu actually killed a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. A three-flower realm cultivator killing someone at the unity of heaven and man realm was simply unheard of. At the very least, they had never heard of such a thing. This kind of strength was simply unimaginable. At this moment, everyone looked at Chu Xiu with horror in their eyes. Was he still human? Up in the restaurant, Chan'er's eyes were also filled with horror. When one's strength reached a certain level, it would make one ignore one's background. Chan'er had always thought that her master was the most outstanding. It was not like her master had never killed a martial artist at the Five Qis origin realm. Killing someone one level higher was definitely not difficult for Xiahou Wujiang. However, no matter how strong Xiahou Wujiang was, he was not strong enough to be able to kill a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm, especially when Feng Wuling was not an ordinary one. Even among the many martial artists at the unity of heaven and man realm, Feng Wuling was considered an expert. With Chan'er's strength, she naturally could not see the danger in the battle between Chu Xiu and Feng Wuling, as well as the flaws in Feng Wuling's performance. Anyway, in the eyes of most people in the Jianghu, they only looked at the results and did not care about the process. They only saw that Chu Xiu killed Feng Wuling. It was that simple. Just now, Chan'er made the decision to let Feng Wuling kill Chu Xiu on her own. It was because she saw the threat Chu Xiu posed. Previously, Xiahou Wujiang did not take Chu Xiu seriously. He had only done this to vent his anger. However, after Chan'er saw Chu Xiu's performance, she knew that if Chu Xiu did not die, he would definitely become a great enemy of her master in the future. Therefore, even though Chan'er knew that Feng Wuling would easily expose himself, she still insisted on letting Feng Wuling kill Chu Xiu. Even if Feng Wuling's identity was exposed and he could not fight for a period of time, it was all worth it as long as he could kill Chu Xiu. However, Chan'er never imagined that Chu Xiu would be so strong that even Feng Wuling died in his hands. Chan'er had already made up her mind. After she returned to the Xiahou clan, she would definitely let her master use all his strength to kill Chu Xiu. Otherwise, if today's matter was exposed, Chu Xiu would definitely become her master's sworn enemy. With such an enemy, her master would definitely be in endless trouble in the future. At the same time, even though Chu Xiu was heavily injured, not a single person in the crowd dared to try and take advantage of him. And it was even to the extent that many people had fled in secret. At this moment, Chu Xiu was no different from a demon in their hearts. Who would dare to go forward and court death? At this moment, Chu Xiu looked at Lin Nani with a sinister murderous look in his eyes. It did not matter whether Lin Nani died or not. What was important was that he wanted to know who set up this trap today. In the battle with Feng Wuling just now, Chu Xiu could not hold back, and it was impossible for him to hold back. Fortunately, there was still Lin Nani alive to interrogate. Seeing Chu Xiu's gaze, Lin Nani suddenly shivered and turned to flee. Just now, he thought that with an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm coming forward, this matter would be in the bag, and Chu Xiu would definitely die. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu was so abnormal that he could even kill an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm? If he had known earlier, he would have fled first. However, it was not too late to escape now. Chu Xiu had just fought with an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm, and he was also seriously injured. It was impossible for him to be as fast as before. In fact, it was indeed as Lin Nani had guessed. Chu Xiu's injuries were not light. Even the speed of the internal binding seal could not be unleashed to its limit. However, Lin Nani did not wait for him to run far before a warrior at the Three-Flower Realm suddenly rushed out of an alley and directly punched at Lin Nani. If Lin Nani was at his peak, he naturally did not care about a small warrior at the Three-Flower Realm. However, he was currently running for his life and did not expect someone to suddenly attack him. This caught Lin Nani off guard and made him block in a panic, but his body was involuntarily blasted a few steps back. The warrior at the Three-Flower Realm who attacked smiled proudly and said, "Old thing, you dare to be so arrogant in my River Sun Prefecture? Now you will suffer." The warrior who suddenly attacked was the local tyrant of River Sun Prefecture, the leader of the Green Tiger Gang. Previously, Lin Nani led a group of people to attack in River Sun Prefecture, not caring about the Green Tiger Gang at all. This had long since made him resentful. However, at that time Lin Nani and the others were powerful, so he did not dare to say anything. Now seeing how brave Chu Xiu was and how he beat the other party into a mess, the leader of the Green Tiger Gang did not mind hitting him when he was down. After being repelled by the sneak attack, Lin Nani did not have time to be angry. He felt a murderous intent coming at him, which made Lin Nani immediately feel bad. Before Lin Nani could turn around, a bright light had already bloomed behind him. The complete Aquarius seal. With a loud bang, Lin Nani was blasted and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he was immediately lifted up by his neck by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu smiled at Lin Nani and said coldly, "You are very good at running. Why don't you keep running now?" Chapter 319. With a move of his body, Chu Xiu went straight to the restaurant. At this time, Chana was actually ready to escape, but she was blocked by Chu Xiu. This made her expression change suddenly, and at the same time, she secretly cursed Lin Nani and the others for being unreliable. But what was even more shocking was the result of Chu Xiu's battle. Chu Xiu looked in the direction that Lin Nani was pointing, and the corner of his mouth revealed a sinister smile. Then he suddenly exerted force in his hand and directly crushed Lin Nani's neck. After killing 2 people to vent his anger, Xiahou Wujiang squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. Chu Xiu. After hearing that it was Xiahou Wujiang, Chu Xiu also had a strange expression on his face. To be honest, he really didn't think that this person would be Xiahou Wujiang. His own woman was killed by Chu Xiu. If Xiahou Wujiang remained indifferent, could he still be considered a man? Just now in the Heiyang prefecture, Chu Xiu was actually holding on. These 2 rogue cultivators thought about it and agreed. The Xiahou clan, one of the 9 great clans, casually squeezed out something from between their teeth, and it was enough for them to eat for a lifetime. Therefore, these 2 warriors also volunteered to bring Chan Er's corpse to the Xiahou clan, and the others actually didn't fight for it, which made the 2 quite surprised. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It seems that my deterrence is still not enough. Your Lin clan is in River East. Do you want to die, and you still want to implicate the old and young in your family? If you tell me, I will let your Lin clan live. If you don't, I will kill your whole family. Don't doubt me. This is not the first time I have done this." Lin Nani gritted his teeth and said, "You really won't touch my Lin clan?" Because it had been some time since the God Weapon Conference, he subconsciously thought that if Xiahou Wujiang wanted to retaliate against him, he would definitely have done it long ago, instead of dragging it until now. "I, Chu Xiu, will do what I say. I still have this bit of credibility," Chu Xiu said indifferently. Several days later, within the Xiahou clan, looking at Lin Nani, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Tell me, who is the person who ordered you to do this?" Chan was not only his personal maid, but also the person who slept by his side. However, Xiahou Wujiang did not have a proper wife, so Chan was only a maid. Otherwise, her identity would have been that of a concubine. Lin Nani thought for a while, and finally seemed to have made up his mind. He said in a low voice, "It was Xiahou Wujiang who contacted us secretly and asked us to provoke the emotions of the warriors of Eastern Qi to kill you." After the shock, their emotions turned into anger. In the end, it turned out to be Xiahou Wujiang, which really surprised Chu Xiu. Lin Nani stared at Chu Xiu in disbelief. "Didn't you just say that you wouldn't kill me? You changed your mind in the blink of an eye." However, they did not expect that the person who made the move was actually Xiahou Wujiang. In their opinion, Xiahou Wujiang and Chu Xiu had a grudge, but the grudge between the 2 sides should not have reached such a level. It was rumored that Xiahou Wujiang would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, and was narrow-minded. Obviously, this was indeed the case. As his voice fell, Chu Xiu looked in the direction of the restaurant, and his eyes revealed a ferocious killing intent. Xiahou Wujiang looked at Chan Er's corpse with an expressionless face, but the people around him could feel the soaring anger that was about to erupt from Xiahou Wujiang's body. In that azure-like massacre just now, Chu Xiu had completely killed their guts. Not to mention that Chu Xiu still had the strength to fight. Even if Chu Xiu was lying on the ground and looked like he was about to die, it was estimated that not many people would dare to go forward to test him. Chu Xiu's seemingly calm words made Lin Nani shiver all of a sudden because he knew that what Chu Xiu said was true. He had killed 3 5-Chi's Origin Realm martial artists in a row, as well as several 3-Flower Realm martial artists in the 3-Flower Realm, and a group of martial artists from the 3-Flower Realm. He had killed hundreds of people on his own, which was shocking enough. After leaving River Sun Prefecture, Chu Xiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and an abnormal flush emerged on his pale face. His face was still pale, and anyone could see that Chu Xiu was seriously injured. However, none of the warriors present dared to follow Chu Xiu, let alone hit him when he was down. Looking at Chu Xiu's murderous face, Chon'er hurriedly said, "Chu." In fact, some people had already instigated the anger of the Eastern Qi warriors before, and some people with a clear mind had already seen that someone was definitely plotting this. Now it seemed that it was indeed the case. However, things were a little different from what they had imagined. Xiahou Wujiang had been looking at the corpse for a while, but he had no intention of rewarding the two of them, which made them a little anxious. This person was quite famous in the Jianghu a few years ago, and he was also a well-known existence among the many Unity of Heaven and Man Realm warriors in the Jianghu. In the end, he died at the hands of Chu Xiu, and at the hands of a 3-Flower Realm warrior in the 3-Flower Realm. How could this not make everyone exclaim? Standing opposite Xiahou Wujiang, the two lone cultivators who had not yet reached the innate realm looked at each other, and they were both a little anxious. Lin Nani's face was full of despair as he was held by the neck by Chu Xiu. There was a hint of struggle in Lin Nani's eyes. Say it. How could it be so simple? If he said it, would Xiahou Wujiang let them go? Chu Xiu's most serious injury was not external, but internal. However, Chon'er could not think so much at this time. As Chu Xiu pulled out the heavenly demon dance, Chon'er's corpse fell to the ground, causing the people around to shiver. One of the warriors mustered up the courage to ask, "Young Master Xiahou." However, what was even more shocking was that Chu Xiu had actually killed Feng Wuling, the mortal sword. When Chon'er regained consciousness, the pitch-black heavenly demon dance had completely pierced through her. Large amounts of blood flowed from her mouth, and Chon'er's eyes were full of disbelief. At this moment, Xiahou Wujiang's hatred for Chu Xiu had reached its peak, and he wanted nothing more than to swallow him alive. As soon as she said this, the surrounding warriors were all horrified. It turned out that this matter was really instigated by someone in the dark. As soon as she said this, she saw Chu Xiu's gaze instantly turn into an abyss, completely pulling her spirit into it. Previously, there were people who said that Chu Xiu's reputation in Eastern Qi was even greater than his reputation in Northern Yan and Guangzhou. After this incident, everyone could almost confirm this point. After killing Feng Wuling, Chu Xiu was already somewhat exhausted. Chu Xiu threw Lin Nani's corpse to the side and said indifferently, "I only said not to destroy your Lin clan, but I didn't say not to kill you." Feng Wuling's sword finger had blasted a bloody hole in Chu Xiu's ribs, but there was sword aura entering his body and entrenched in Chu Xiu's meridians, tearing them apart continuously. It would probably take some time for it to be cleared. After saying this, Chu Xiu's figure slowly left the long street and walked out of River Sun Prefecture. She could not believe that Chu Xiu had killed her without even listening to a word from her. Did Chu Xiu not know her identity? Xiahou Wujiang. Of course, what made them even more horrified was Chu Xiu's attitude. When Lin Nani saw that Chu Xiu did not speak, he thought that Chu Xiu did not believe him. Lin Nani hurriedly said, "What I said is true. Xiahou Wujiang's maidservant, Chon'er, is observing this from that restaurant." Therefore, after receiving the news, Xiahou Wujiang did not care about the strength displayed by Chu Xiu, nor did he care about the dead Feng Wuling. Right now he could not wait to immediately cut Chu Xiu into 1,000 pieces. While Chu Xiu was recuperating, news of what happened in River Sun Prefecture also spread, and it immediately caused a stir in the Eastern Qi martial arts circle. Since they wanted to kill Chu Xiu, they had naturally studied Chu Xiu's information. Whether it was during the period of the Blue Dragon Society or the period of the Guangzhou torture room, it was not the first time that Chu Xiu had destroyed an entire family and clan. He would really do what he said. This time, they were actually played like monkeys and came here to seek death from Chu Xiu. How could they not be angry? Chu Xiu killed such a beautiful woman just like that. He was really cruel and merciless. River Sun Prefecture was not a place to recuperate, and Chu Xiu's current injuries could no longer support him on his journey. Therefore, Chu Xiu forced himself to find a deserted mountain, blasted a cave, and temporarily recuperated in it. They were the ones who brought Cha Er's body back. It was precisely because Chu Xiu said that as long as they brought Cha Er's body back to the Xiahou clan, they would definitely be rewarded. That was why they made this trip. Therefore, Chu Xiu previously guessed that it might be the crown prince or the second prince who did it. They had the reason and the ability to cause such a big movement in such a short period of time. This woman was Xiahou Wujiang's person, but in the end, Chu Xiu killed her just like that. He didn't even give her a chance to say a word. One could imagine how Chu Xiu's attitude towards Xiahou Wujiang and the Xiahou clan was. He really wasn't afraid of fighting to the death with the Xiahou clan. Just as his words left his mouth, Xiahou Wujiang waved his hand. In an instant, 2 beams of golden light poured into the bodies of these 2 people. With a loud explosion, the heads of these 2 people directly exploded from the stellar energy imbued with powerful psyche. Chu Xiu flung the blood off his saber, pointed at Cha Er's body, and said indifferently, "If any of you have the time, send her body to the Xiahou clan. Xiahou Wujiang will give you a lot of money. Also, help me pass a message to Xiahou Wujiang. Since he wants to play, then I, Chu Xiu, will play with him to the end. Let's see who can play the other to death in the end." The You Maiden Sword mantra was powerful. As long as one comprehended its essence, the might of its sword Tao was simply beyond imagination. However, it was useless to be angry. The other party was the most outstanding genius of this generation of the Nansong Xiahou clan. Even if they, these poor wandering martial artists, were played by him, they could only endure it. How could they go and find Xiahou Wujiang to ask for an explanation? However, Chu Xiu couldn't show the slightest bit of weakness. Otherwise, he couldn't be sure if someone would hit him when he was down. The headless body fell to the ground. Perhaps it was only at the moment before they died that they knew why no one fought with them over it. Who would fight over something that was sending themselves to death? Chapter 320. Xiahou Wujiang's reputation in the Xiahou clan wasn't very good. Everyone knew that this young master was narrow-minded and had a bad temper. Normally, they would hide from Xiahou Wujiang, not to mention at a time like this. So when Xiahou Wujiang was furious, the servants of the Xiahou clan all hid far away, for fear that they would be like those 2 idiots and give Xiahou Wujiang a chance to vent his anger. At this time, the door of the courtyard was opened, and Xiahou Wujiang turned around and scolded, "Get out!" But before he could scold, he forcibly swallowed it back, because the middle-aged man in a brocade robe who pushed open the door was the clan leader of the Xiahou clan and also Xiahou Wujiang's father, Godlingyun Xiaohuzhen. This generation of the Xiahou clan was full of heroes. Xiaohuzhen's aptitude was mediocre when he was young, and he wasn't valued at all. He only stepped into the innate realm in his 20s, which was considered fast compared to other martial artists, but in the Xiahou clan, it could only be said to be mediocre. But after stepping into the innate realm, Xiaohuzhen amazed everyone with a single brilliant feat. It was as if he had no bottlenecks, and he crossed the 5th level of the Qi-controlling realm all the way to become a martial arts master. Moreover, he also displayed his incomparably skilled skills, as if he was crushing all his opponents at that time, and became the clan leader of the Xiahou clan. Seeing Xiahou Wujiang's appearance, Xiaohuzhen said indifferently, "What, can't afford to lose? Are you going to do it yourself?" Before Xiahou Wujiang could speak, he saw Xiaohuzhen's gaze instantly turn gloomy. "What did I teach you back then? If you don't kill a snake, you will be harmed. If you want to deal with someone, you either don't make a move, or if you make a move, you must completely defeat the other party in one blow. But what about you? You always do things with a joking mind, and you don't put anyone in your eyes. Do you really think you're invincible in the younger generation? Or do you think that my Xiahou clan is the former Kunlun devil cult that can suppress the world, and you don't put anyone in your eyes?" Xiahou Wujiang was just about to defend himself when Xiaohuzhen shouted, "You still dare to quibble?" Xiahou Wujiang's mouth moved. He was scolded without saying a word. If he really dared to defend himself, Xiahozhen would probably directly slap him. With a cold snort, Xiahozhen said, "Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. You're too talented and you've been too successful since you were young. This has also led you to look down on everyone. I warned you when you offended Mo Tianlin because of that girl from the Luo family. After all, Mo Tianlin is a disciple of the Mo family of Shangyang. Mo Tianlin is inferior to you now, but what about in the future?" Although some people were not your match in a direct confrontation, if they wanted to hit you while you were down, they would definitely bring you big trouble. Chu Xiu's ranking on the Longhu roll is above yours. After the Divine Armament meeting, he became the most outstanding disciple of the Guanzhong Punishment Hall's younger generation, and Guan Xiu thought highly of him. He is now the Guanzhong Torture Room's patrol inspector, and he will be the torture officer in the future. How do you know that he won't become the hall master of the Guanzhong Torture Room in the future? Because of your actions, you will offend a big shot of the Guanzhong Torture Room in the future, and cause our Xiahou clan to have a grudge with the Guanzhong Torture Room. After saying so much, you are good in every way, and you are qualified to be the future heir of our Xiahou clan. But there is one thing that is your weakness, and that is arrogance. It's not a problem for ordinary people to be arrogant, but as the heir of the Xiahou clan, one of the 9 great clans, arrogance will kill you. Xiahozhen's words made Xiahou Wujiang break out in a cold sweat. Normally, he would not take Xiahozhen's words to heart, but now, combined with the matter of Chu Xiu, Xiahou Wujiang also found that he was indeed a little arrogant this time. He did not regard Chu Xiu as an opponent, and he only wanted to teach him a lesson. But the result was self-defeating. Chana was dead, and so was Feng Wuling. Not only did he fail to accomplish his task, but he also completely formed a grudge with Chu Xiu. It could be said that he suffered a double loss, and did not get any benefits. Xiahou Wujiang said in a low voice, "Then father, what should we do now?" Xiahozhen snorted coldly and said, "You have the nerve to ask me what to do? Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you've caused this time? You secretly instigated the warriors of Eastern Qi to make a move against Chu Xiu. Although the ones who were affected were those rogue warriors, and there were no real big shots, it also affected the reputation of the Xiahou clan. Now that you have made a move, the news has probably spread to the Guanzhong Torture Room. If you dare to make a move again, it will be like slapping the face of the Guanzhong Torture Room, and then throwing it into the mud and stepping on it. At that time, I guess Guan Xiu will personally come to the Xiahou clan to ask for an explanation. If you can face Chu Xiu squarely and kill him in one go, then the trouble will only be temporary, and I will help you deal with it. But in the end you failed, and instead let Chu Xiu show off his power. Then this trouble will be long-term. At least for now, you can't touch Chu Xiu anymore. Also, the Yunnu Palace is also a problem. You really have the guts to dare to recruit people like Feng Wuling. Even I don't know about this matter. It's not like you didn't see how the Yunnu Palace chased after Feng Wuling in the past few years. After this matter, although Feng Wuling is dead, the Yunnu Palace has already come to the door, and wants the Xiahou clan to give them an explanation. After all, those women are not big-hearted. Your matter this time has already caused the elders to be very dissatisfied. From today onwards, you will go to the ancestral hall to cultivate in seclusion. Without my permission, you are not allowed to see anyone, and you are not allowed to take half a step out of the ancestral hall. After saying that, Xiahozhen snorted coldly and turned to leave. In fact, Xiahozhen was not so angry in his heart. This matter might be a good thing for Xiahou Wujiang. Xiahozhen had been quiet for a long time, and his state of mind and potential had been polished to perfection. This was why he could amaze the world with a brilliant feat and catch up from behind. On the other hand, his son was the exact opposite. He was born a genius and had never suffered any setbacks or hardships in his life. This also led to the defect of his arrogant character. If the matter of Chu Xiu could make Xiahou Wujiang reflect thoroughly and change this bad habit, it might be a good thing. The Battle of River Sun Prefecture caused a lot of noise in Eastern Qi, but in the end, it was still suppressed by the Xiahou clan. Anyway, Chu Xiu did not die in the end, and the Guanzhong Torture Room could not cause trouble for the Xiahou clan with great fanfare just for Chu Xiu. As for the Yunnu Palace, The Xiahou clan also used some unknown method to settle the matter. In short, the matter was temporarily peaceful. Half a month later, Chu Xiu also walked out of the cave where he cultivated in seclusion. Squinting at the sun above his head, Chu Xiu's face was still pale at this time. Although his injuries were healed, his vitality was not so easy to recover. This time, the injuries Chu Xiu suffered were also a little serious, so after returning to the Guanzhong torture room, he also had to continue to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time, so that he could completely recover his vitality, and also try to break through the 5 Qis collecting in Origin Realm. After coming out of seclusion, Chu Xiu also specially inquired about the matter regarding the Xiahou clan. After learning that Xiahou Wujiang was grounded, and that the Xiahou clan had completely suppressed the disturbance, Chu Xiu also understood that this matter should be Xiahou Wujiang's own decision, and the Xiahou clan did not participate in it. Otherwise, if the Xiahou clan wanted to kill him, Chu Xiu would not have escaped so easily, and the Xiahou clan would not have let go so easily either. Just as Chu Xiu was preparing to return to the Guanzhong torture room, just as he appeared in the prefecture government, someone took the initiative to come to the door, and this person was something that Chu Xiu did not expect. The person who came turned out to be the Guangdong torturer of the Guanzhong torture room. Million Swords Flow Xiao Yi. Seeing Xiao Yi coming, Chu Xiu could not help but ask curiously, "Why are you here, Lord Xiao?" The corner of Xiao Yi's mouth had a faint smile, and he said, "How could the Guanzhong torture room not know that you caused such a big mess in Eastern Qi? You are the most outstanding young disciple of the Guanzhong torture room of this generation. If the Guanzhong torture room did not even have the slightest bit of response, it would be a little too much. In order to prevent the Xiahou clan from making another move, I came to receive you, but who knew that you would hide yourself? I have been looking for you for many days, and only when someone said that you had appeared here, did I rush over." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Thank you, Lord Xiao, for your help." At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something and asked, "Lord Xiao, did the hall master send you this time?" Chu Xiu was a little puzzled, because Xiao Yi did not seem to have any relationship with him. If someone had come, it should have been Wei Jiuduan, who was his superior. Chu Xiu vaguely guessed something, and he could not help but sneer in his heart. Xiao Yi was stunned, but then he smiled and said, "It is said that you are not on good terms with your superior, Wei Jiuduan, so I can't be bothered to cover for him. The hall master said in front of the 4 of us that he was going to send someone to receive you. So this person was indeed sent by Wei Jiuduan. However, the older one gets, the more afraid they are of death. That old fellow Wei Jiuduan was probably worried that the Xiahou clan would continue to make a move, so he pretended that he did not understand the hall master's intentions. Thus, the hall master could only send me, who asked me to be so free during this period of time." When Xiao Yi revealed the matter, Chu Xiu was actually not angry. In any case, he and Wei Jiuduan had completely fallen out because of the Wei and Zhang clans. However, he really did not expect that Wei Jiuduan would dare to play such a trick in front of Guan Xiyu. He reckoned that his position in Guan Xiyu's heart would definitely plummet. After all, as a superior, Wei Jiuduan had even made excuses to save his subordinate. One could imagine what he would do in the face of the Guanzhong torture room's crisis. It was fine to have some selfish motives and play some tricks, but when it came to the Guanzhong torture room's reputation, Wei Jiuduan actually dared to do such a thing. He really did not know what was good for him. Of course, it was also possible that Wei Jiuduan knew that he was about to retire, so a dead pig was not afraid of boiling water. So what if Guan Xiyu had a good impression of him? Could she still keep him in the Guanzhong torture room? Chapter 321. Chu Xiu didn't continue asking about Wei Jiuduan. After all, he wasn't that familiar with Xiao Yi, and some things weren't easy to talk about. However, Xiao Yi was very talkative. He patted Chu Xiu's shoulder and said, "Xiahou Wujiang schemed against you this time. Although it's a personal grudge between the 2 of you, Xiahou Wujiang's methods are a bit too dirty. You're from the Guanzhong torture room, and Xiahou Wujiang slandered you. That's the same as slandering the Guanzhong torture room. However, although Master Guan wants to interfere in this matter, he can't do so. The Guanzhong torture room has been dealing with internal affairs all these years, so it's not that famous in the pugilistic world. At least, it's not as famous as the Xiahou clan, which is one of the top 9 aristocratic families. In addition, the Xiahou clan stopped in time, so Master Guan is prepared to let this matter go. Chu Xiu nodded. He didn't feel that it was unfair. Big forces were like this. They were thinking about giving in and compromising with each other. Moreover, he had heard that even the Yunnu Palace had appeared to demand an explanation from Madame Xiahou, but they had been dealt with by Madame Xiahou. In that case, even if he went to the Guanzhong punishment hall, it would be useless. At this time, Xiaoyi suddenly stared at Chu Xiu and said, "To be honest, I kind of want to fight with you now. You know my background. I used to be a disciple of the Sitting Sword Hut, and Feng Wuling's inheritance is in the Yunnu Palace. Back when the Yunnu Palace was chasing after him, I wanted to find a chance to fight with him, and have a taste of the Yunnu sword. It was very unpleasant to fight with those women from the Yunnu Palace. Now that a man has finally come, I've wanted to try it for a long time. I didn't expect Feng Wuling to be killed by you once he appeared after disappearing for so many years. Now I want to fight with you." Chu Xiu smiled bitterly and said, "Don't tease me, Lord Xiao. Don't you know how strong I am? Feng Wuling did die in my hands, but I won that battle by sheer luck. There was a loophole in Feng Wuling's heart, and it was a huge loophole. In that battle, I completely tore apart the hole in his mental state, and only then was I able to seize the last chance to kill him. If Feng Wuling was at his peak, I wouldn't have the slightest confidence in killing him. In fact, I don't even know if I could escape alive from Feng Wuling." Xiaoyi smiled and said, "Don't be humble. Being able to find loopholes is also a kind of ability. If it were someone else, they wouldn't be able to find any loopholes even if they searched for all the detailed information on Feng Wuling. Even if they found them, they wouldn't have the ability to do so." Chu Xiu cupped his fists and said, "Lord Xiao is overpraising me." After exchanging a few more pleasantries, the two of them set off, ready to return to the Guanzhong torture room. Xiaoyi was a little lazy and talkative, always taking the initiative to talk to others. However, he got along well with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu was also from the Forgetting Sword Hut, one of the 5 major sword sects, and had a unique understanding of martial arts. Although Chu Xiu was only at the 3-flower realm, his combat strength was extremely shocking. He could have a good chat with Xiaoyi on this point. Of course, this was also due to Chu Xiu's killing of Feng Wuling. Otherwise, Xiaoyi wouldn't have been interested in talking so much with an ordinary 3-flower realm martial artist. Nothing happened on the way back to the Guanzhong torture room. Since the Xiahou clan had already decided to completely suppress the matter, they naturally wouldn't come out and cause trouble again. After returning to the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was surrounded by the martial artists who came and went from the Guanzhong torture room. The Guanzhong torture room had been quiet for so many years, and there were actually not many people who could really make a name for themselves in the martial world. For example, the torture officers and the leaders of the Guanzhong torture room were actually not weak. For example, Xiao Yi and Si Ming. In Chu Xiu's opinion, their strength was definitely not weaker than experts at the level of Mr. Liu and the Heavenly Sin branch leader. However, they were very low-key and unknown in the martial world. In the end, Chu Xiu, a disciple of the younger generation, made such a big name for himself in the martial world. This was somewhat unexpected to many. Of course, most of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room looked at Chu Xiu with kind eyes. No matter how bad Chu Xiu's reputation was outside, and how many people scolded him, at the very least, Chu Xiu was a member of the Guanzhong torture room. He also represented the Guanzhong torture room in the martial world. This also made the constables of the Guanzhong torture room feel proud. As for those who were jealous, although there were people, they were still in the minority. After all, Chu Xiu's current achievements were a little too great. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they should know how big the gap between them and Chu Xiu was. Jealousy? It was basically a joke to say it out loud. Xiao Yi brought Chu Xiu to the main hall to report. Not only was Guan Siyu there, but the other 3 torture officers were also there. Xiao Yi walked into the hall and said with a smile, cupping his hands, "Hall Master, I was fortunate enough to not let you down. I went through a lot of trouble to bring Chu Xiu back. I completed such a big task. You should at least give me some reward, right? Guan Xiu knew Xiao Yi's character. When he heard this, he only said lightly, some people from the Miaojiang of West Chu want to use the land of Guanzhong to open up a trade route to northern Yan. They are going back and forth with the Guanzhong torture room. I will reward you to negotiate with them. How about that? When Xiao Yi heard this, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, forget it. Those guys from the Miaojiang are famous for being difficult. I don't want to deal with them. Xiao Yi joked, but the atmosphere in the hall was a bit strange. As Chu Xiu's superior, Wei Juduan should have gone up to greet Chu Xiu when he returned. However, he didn't say a word. He looked at Chu Xiu with deep fear. Previously, because of the Wei family's matter, Wei Juduan had already fallen out with Chu Xiu. But at that time, Chu Xiu had the general trend. Even though he was Chu Xiu's superior, he couldn't even think about punishing Chu Xiu. Therefore, the matter could only be left unsettled, allowing Chu Xiu to grasp the business lifeline of the entire Guanxi region. Wei Juduan could do nothing about it. Originally, Wei Juduan was prepared to wait for Chu Xiu's general trend to dissipate before teaching Chu Xiu a lesson. He wanted him to know what it meant to respect his superiors and subordinates. However, he didn't expect that Chu Xiu would become even more famous after going out. There were even rumors that he had killed a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. This made Wei Juduan extremely fearful. He also put away the thought of teaching Chu Xiu a lesson. However, he was still unwilling to concede to a subordinate like Chu Xiu when he was about to retire. This could be considered an obsession of Wei Juduan. Therefore, even in front of Guan Xiu, he still acted like this. He couldn't even be bothered to put on an act. As for Yin Batong, ever since Chu Xiu entered the hall, he had been glaring at him fiercely. At this time, he even stood up and coldly snorted. Chu Xiu, today the hall master and the other disciplinary officers are here. I want to ask you, how did my disciple Wang Qianping die? If you don't give me an explanation, this matter will definitely not end. Yin Batong had endured this matter for a long time. Cheng Zhouhai and the others had returned safely. They had even brought back merits and benefits. In the end, his disciple Wang Qianping had died in Eastern Qi. How could Yin Batong tolerate this? Cheng Zhouhai's position was absolutely neutral. He didn't side with Wang Qianping, nor did he side with Chu Xiu. He just recounted what had happened. It was true that Wang Qianping had been killed by a phaseless demon sect martial artist. However, Wang Qianping had a conflict with Chu Xiu before. In the end, just after the conflict had ended, Wang Qianping had died. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? In any case, Yin Batong didn't believe it. When Chu Xiu heard this, a hint of ridicule appeared on his face. He said, what Lord Yin said is interesting. Wang Qianping didn't die in my hands. Why do you need an explanation from me? On the battlefield, a moment of distraction could easily lead to death. Wang Qianping was too slow. Who could he blame when he was killed by a phaseless demon sect martial artist? If you ask me, you should blame yourself, Lord Yin. Lord Yin, your nickname is the Shadowless Flying Dragon. Your speed can be said to be the fastest in my Guanzhong torture room. In the end, your disciple's speed is so slow. Could it be that you, Lord Yin, held back when you were teaching your disciple? Could it be that you were afraid that your disciple would starve to death? The current Chu Xiu wasn't the Chu Xiu of the past. He had the power to kill a unity of heaven and man expert. Even if he wasn't in existence at the level of the disciplinary officer, he still had the guts to challenge Yin Batong and the other martial artists. Yin Batong's face turned gloomy when he heard Chu Xiu's words. He said coldly, Chu Xiu, how dare you be so impudent in front of the hall master? Do you still have any respect? Wang Qianping had a conflict with you before he died. In the end, he died the next day. How can there be such a coincidence in this world? Chu Xiu spread his hands and said, who can say for sure what the heavens do? If you want to blame someone, you can only blame that Wang Qianping's bad luck and your poor teaching. You have to know that there are many martial artists who have conflicts with me, Chu Xiu. If everyone's death is blamed on me, then wouldn't I, Chu Xiu, be a god of death? Moreover, that Wang Qianping died in the hands of the phaseless demon sect's demon. In the end you push the blame on me. What do you mean by that? Are you saying that I, Chu Xiu, have colluded with the demon? Lordine, sometimes, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. I am someone from the Guanzhong torture room. You slander me for colluding with the demon. Isn't that the same as splashing dirty water on the Guanzhong torture room? There are some words that you have to think carefully before you speak. After Chu Xiu finished speaking, Yin Buotong's face was already red with anger. When had he ever been talked back to like this by a junior martial artist? Taking a step forward, Yin Buotong's entire body erupted with gang qi. Even if it was in front of the Guanzhong torture room, he had to teach Chu Xiu a lesson. Don't think that just because you killed a Unity of Heaven Realm martial artist, Chu Xiu's strength can really be compared to a Unity of Heaven Realm martial artist. Who knows what kind of crafty tricks you used in the battle? However, before he could make a move, a figure had already blocked in front of him. This person was actually Chu Simo. This was something that no one present had expected. Chapter 322. Among the torture officers in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Simo had always kept the lowest profile. This was related to his status. After all, he was of the lowest status among all the torture officers in the Guanzhong torture room, and the head of the narcotics department. Moreover, he was of a different race, so it was inevitable that he would be looked down upon and even discriminated against. Therefore, Chu Simo kept an extremely low profile most of the time in the Guanzhong torture room. If no one provoked him, he would not take the initiative to provoke them either. Chu Xiu's superior, Wei Jiuduan, did not care about this matter. Xiao Yi, who had been walking with Chu Xiu the entire time and had some friendly relations with him, did not care either. In the end, it was Chu Simo who took the initiative to stand up for him. This slightly stunned everyone present. Chu Xiu's lips curled into an imperceptible smile. He knew why Chu Simo stood up for him. He had pulled Chu Xiaoda, a warrior with mediocre aptitude, into the 9-branch division for Chu Simo. Now it seemed that he had made the right move. Chu Xiaoda indeed had a special place in Chu Simo's heart. He was actually able to make Chu Simo side with Chu Xiu in such a public situation. Yin Batong said fiercely, "Chu Simo, what do you want?" Chu Simo said indifferently, "Nothing much. I just want to remind you that this is the Guanzhong torture room. The hall master is still here. You, a dignified torture officer, are making a scene here and even attacking a junior. You might be shameless, but we torture officers like you do." Yin Buotong's face darkened. He immediately pointed at Chu Simo and began to curse. However, at this moment, Guan Siyu finally spoke. He snorted coldly and said, "All right, shut up. It's already over. There's no evidence, so there's no need to pursue this matter." Chu Xiu did not leave any traces behind, and the most important thing in the Guanzhong torture room was evidence. In addition, with Chu Xiu's current status, so what if Yin Batong was the torture officer? He could not casually smear Chu Xiu's name. Seeing that Guan Siyu had already spoken, Yin Batong could only snort coldly and keep quiet. Guan Siyu said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, Cheng Zhouhai and company have already explained everything. However, you're the leader of this case. Tell them again." Chu Xiu nodded and repeated the matter to Guan Siyu. Of course, what Chu Xiu said was what he had modified. It was what others could see. For example, why did Chu Xiu insist on killing Qiu Dongmao, even to the point of ruining the Jiangdong 5 heroes? Chu Xiu could totally push the blame to Qiu Dongmao's poisoning of Qiu Zhencheng. He was doing it for the sake of the Guanzhong torture room's reputation. He had to be thorough when doing things. The Guanzhong torture room could not afford to make any mistakes when handling a case. However, everyone present secretly shook their heads when they heard this. Did Chu Xiu look like a selfless person? Anyway, no matter how they looked at it, they did not believe it. Other than that, they really couldn't think of any other reason. Although the 5 heroes of the River East were famous, they were all lone cultivators. To put it simply, killing them would only bring them trouble, but it would be of no value at all. Qiu Dongmao was just an illegitimate child, so he was also of no value. Apart from Qiu Zhencheng's case, they really could not find any suspicious points for Chu Xiu to kill them. Guan Siyu nodded and said, "Okay, you can leave now. I'll get someone to send the reward for this mission to Guanxi. You're still injured, so go back and recuperate first. After all, Guan Xiyu was a martial Dao master. She could almost see the injuries on Chu Xiu's body at a glance. Chu Xiu also cupped his hands and said, "Yes, Hall Master." Then Chu Xiu followed everyone out of the door. After leaving the main hall, Wei Juduan's slightly cold voice sounded behind Chu Xiu. "Chu Xiu, I really underestimated you. You can actually fight to death with an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. What method did you use? Was it the strongest hidden weapon of the Qianji sect, or the strange poison of the Five Poison sect?" Although many people saw Chu Xiu kill Feng Wuling, most of the people in the pugilistic world still did not believe it after hearing the news. They still believed that Chu Xiu used some cheating methods during the fight, such as hidden weapons or poison. Only these things that could not be guarded against could allow people to kill people of a higher level at will. Although Chu Xiu's use of the heaven's sun gazing at air was indeed a little suspicious, it was also part of Chu Xiu's strength. If there were no loopholes in one's body, it would be useless for Chu Xiu to use the heaven's sun gazing at air. Wei Jiuduan was such a person. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could rely on his own strength to kill an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. Chu Xiu turned around and smiled. The pugilistic world only cares about the results, not the process. I'm standing here, and Feng Wuling has already become a corpse. It's that simple. Does Lord Wei still want to spar with me, your subordinate, to see if I have the strength to fight against an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm? Even an idiot could hear the sarcasm in Chu Xiu's words. Wei Juduan's face immediately darkened. He took a step forward, lowered his voice, and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, do you still remember that you're my subordinate? Don't forget, I'm still the Guanxi torture officer. The rules of the Guanzhong torture room are the most important. Those who offend their superiors have never had a good ending." Chu Xiu said lightly, "I've never wanted to offend you, Lord. Think about it carefully. Ever since I joined you, I've given you many benefits. As long as you don't force me, I naturally won't make things difficult for you. I won't offend others if they don't offend me. Lord, you're going to retire soon. Can't you just enjoy your days of power and peace?" With that, Chu Xiu turned around and left. However, Wei Juduan, who was behind him, had a strong sense of fear in his eyes. Previously, Wei Juduan had misjudged Chu Xiu, but this time, he would not be wrong. This Chu Xiu was definitely an extremely ambitious person. If Wei Juduan did not touch him, he was afraid that all his power in the Guanxi area would be completely taken away. At that time, what difference would it be from him retiring early? Listening to Chu Xiu's tone, it was obvious that when Chu Xiu had yet to gain a foothold in the Guanxi area, he had always addressed him as Lord. Now, however, it had changed to Lord, and he was on equal footing with Wei Juduan. From this, one could see Chu Xiu's attitude. However, Wei Juduan really could not think of any way to touch Chu Xiu. There was no reason, nor was there an opportunity. Therefore, Wei Juduan could only snort coldly, turn around and leave. On the other side, Chu Xiu did not care about Wei Juduan. In fact, what he said just now was true. During this period of time, Chu Xiu would be busy cultivating in seclusion, trying to break through to the Five Qis origin realm. As long as Wei Juduan did not provoke him, he naturally could not be bothered to provoke Wei Juduan. Of course, whether Wei Juduan believed him or not depended on him. Just as Chu Xiu was thinking about these things, a few people walked over from the opposite side. The person in the center had a graceful figure and was incomparably charming. It was Guan Xiyu's wife, Mei Qinglian. There were a few maids by her side. They had probably followed her out shopping and had just returned. The instant he saw Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. His aura began to become indistinct and unfathomable. He used the heaven's sun's gazing at air. At this moment, in Chu Xiu's eyes, Mei Qinglian was no longer a delicate and charming woman. Her entire body was flashing with layers of black threads. They were so dense that they even enveloped her entire body. With Chu Xiu's current cultivation of the heaven's sun's gazing at air, he couldn't see any flaws in Mei Qinglian at all. He couldn't even see the trajectories of some of the threads. Chu Xiu's expression didn't change. He put away the heaven's sun's gazing at air, and Mei Qinglian seemed to sense something. She walked straight towards Chu Xiao. She stood less than a foot away from him, and a thick but not cloying fragrance wafted over. Pressing her lips against Chu Xiao's ear, Mei Qinglian whispered softly, "Official Chu, what did you see?" Chu Xiao took a step back and said with a faint smile, "I saw Madame's beauty." Mei Qinglian covered her mouth and laughed. Official Chu really knows how to talk. Chu Xiao looked straight into Mei Qinglian's eyes and said, "I only know how to speak the truth." It was hard to tell what Mei Qinglian was thinking, but she still took a step back. She waved her hand and walked into the main hall with her maidservants. Chu Xiao stood where he was without a change in expression. At this moment, he was sure that there was something wrong with Mei Qinglian. Even the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot might have something to do with Mei Qinglian. But what did that have to do with him? Mei Qinglian and Chu Xiao had no conflict, nor did she threaten Chu Xiao's interests. Why would Chu Xiao take the initiative to cause trouble? He said that he only saw Mei Qinglian's beauty, and that was the truth. As for whether Mei Qinglian would affect the interests of the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiao couldn't care less. He had no loyalty to the Guanzhong torture room. To be precise, Chu Xiao would not be loyal to anyone or any force. He only needed the loyalty of others. After returning to the Jianzhou Prefecture's Inspector Hall, Du Guangzhong, Ghost Hand King, and others specially gathered in the Jianzhou Prefecture to welcome Chu Xiao. At this time, Chu Xiao's people were not only concentrated in the Jianzhou Prefecture, but also in all the prefectures in Guanxi, except for the prefectures directly under Weijiu. It could be said that the business lifeline of the entire Guanxi was in the hands of Chu Xiao. The other inspectors of Guanxi had no choice but to acquiesce to this behavior. Of the Guanxi inspectors, Yang Ling was secretly one of Chu Xiao's people. Jiang Taoran, Situxing, and Feng Hua did not dare to provoke Chu Xiao. The remaining Wei Chongling of the Nine Plains Wei family was dissatisfied with Chu Xiao's actions. But he had already been taught a lesson by Chu Xiao. Even the Nine Plains Wei family did not have a good time at Chu Xiao's hands. What could he use to challenge Chu Xiao? So right now, Chu Xiao's people controlled almost half of Guanxi. In some places, their words were more effective than the local inspectors. Chapter 323. Chu Xiao had made a name for himself in Jianghu. As his subordinates, Du Guangzhong and the others naturally felt honored. Moreover, during this period of time, almost no one dared to provoke them in the entire Guanxi area. Their status was far higher than that of the Jianghu arresters in other prefectures. Did the Wei and Zhang families do anything during this period of time? Chu Xiao asked. Du Guangzhong shook his head and said, "My lord, you had the upper hand previously, and the Wei and Zhang families had already suffered a loss. How would they dare to challenge you now? Therefore, during this period of time, the Wei and Zhang families have been very quiet and did not provoke us. Now that you are back, I think they will not dare to do anything." Chu Xiao nodded and said, "That's good. In fact, the Wei and Zhang families will not be able to do anything because they are only Jianghu forces in the Guanzhong area. And the Guanzhong area belongs to the Guanzhong torture room. No matter what they do, it will be useless. The one we really need to be careful of is that old thing, Wei Jiuduan. He is now about to retire, and he doesn't even care about Hall Master Guan's impression of him. This kind of person will not bring me any benefits, but will instead cause me some trouble." In front of everyone present, Chu Xiao called Wei Jiuduan old thing. But no one present found it strange. They were all Chu Xiao's confidants, and Wei Jiuduan was an old man who was about to retire. Even if Chu Xiao asked them to scold Wei Jiuduan, they would dare to scold him. After giving a few instructions to the people present, and holding a banquet in the evening, Chu Xiao directly went into seclusion. At present, Chu Xiao had gone through several fierce battles in a row. He had accumulated a lot of strength, but at the same time, his vitality was greatly damaged. It was indeed time for him to go into seclusion and rest. Moreover, Chu Xiao felt that he had accumulated enough. With the 5 elemental regeneration pill he obtained from Eastern Qi, he could try to break through the 5 Qis collecting origin stage. Although he was not 100% sure, Chu Xiao was at least 90% sure. After that, Chu Xiu would try to further comprehend the heavens sun-gazing at air skill. This would require a certain amount of time. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu didn't really like this kind of closed-door training. He preferred to comprehend and break through in battle. Although it was dangerous, it was much faster. However, the path of martial arts required too many sacrifices, and perseverance was one of them. In order to break through bottlenecks, some martial artists in the Jianghu would even choose to go into seclusion for several years, or even decades. If he succeeded, his strength would increase greatly. If he failed, he would become a skeleton in a grave. During the closed-door training, it took Chu Xiu a full month to recover his primordial qi. When his primordial qi was almost restored, Chu Xiu took the 5-elemental regeneration pill and began to refine it. The 5-elemental power of the 5-elemental regeneration pill seeped into Chu Xiu's 5 internal organs, making the 5-elemental power in Chu Xiu's body flourish. It constantly polished the power of his 5 internal organs, making the 5 elements one. This was also a painstaking effort. It would take a certain amount of time to refine the medicinal power and push it to perfection. Finally, it would reach the 5 qis collecting origin stage. While Chu Xiu was in closed-door training, the outside world seemed very calm. This was especially so in Guanxi. Chu Xiu came back with a powerful aura, which was enough to deter thieves and thieves. Even if some people wanted to cause trouble before, they put away those ideas when Chu Xiu came back. At this time, in a restaurant in Guanxi's Chenzhou Prefecture, Fire Slave was sitting in a corner. He ordered a few dishes and drank wine leisurely. He looked very satisfied. Chu Xiu's subordinates had completely controlled the commercial lifeline of the entire Guanxi. Fire Slave was the one who controlled the Chenzhou Prefecture. Fire Slave was very satisfied with his current life. He could even wake up from his dreams with a smile. In fact, Fire Slave was a very contented person. He had a difficult past. As long as his current life was a little better than before, he would be satisfied. A contented person would be very happy. Fire Slave was very happy now. Fire Slave was a slave of a foreign tribe in the western region. From a slave who was slaughtered at will, he became an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society and controlled the lives of others. Fire Slave was very satisfied with this. From a killer of the Green Dragon Gang who killed all day long, he became a Jianghu arrester of the Guanzhong Punishment Hall. He followed Chu Xiu. Although he was a Jianghu arrester, the inspectors of other prefectures had to treat him politely. He received a lot of salary every month, and he didn't need to fight a few times. He had a lot of time to practice, and he even had time to enjoy life as leisurely as he was now. In the eyes of Fire Slave before, he was living like an immortal. However, although Fire Slave was living like an immortal, it didn't mean that he had slacked off. On the contrary, the more he enjoyed this kind of life, the harder he had to cultivate to maintain this kind of life. Because he knew that all this was brought to him by strength. Without strength, he couldn't escape the western region, join the Blue Dragon Society, and wouldn't be valued by Chu Xiu as much as he was now. Just as Fire Slave was leisurely drinking and letting his imagination run wild, a few people at a table not far away caught his attention. Those people were young warriors in brocade robes. They looked like young masters from aristocratic families. They weren't strong, but they weren't weak either. They were all in the Xiantian realm. One of the young masters in a blue brocade robe asked the young master in white, "Brother Wei, you haven't come out all this time. Why? Are you grounded by your family's old man?" The young master in white was a direct descendant of the Nine Plains Wei family, Wei Chen. Although he wasn't the son of the family head, Wei Mok, he was the son of an elder with real power in the Wei family. His status in the Wei family wasn't low. Hearing this, he just snorted coldly and said, "Grounded my ass. This young master didn't do anything wrong. What right does he have to ground me? It's just that the old ancestor recently ordered us Wei family disciples to keep a low profile. It's not like you don't know how timid my old man is. He insisted that I stay in the Wei family to cultivate. I've been stifled to death recently." The young master in blue smiled and said, "Could it be because of the Jianzhou Prefecture's patrol inspector, Chu Xiu? The news that your Wei family suffered a setback at the hands of Chu Xiu has spread throughout the entire Guanxi. It's normal for you to be more careful now. Hearing this, Wei Chen's expression changed. He slammed his wine cup on the table and said coldly, Han Mu, if you don't know how to speak, then don't speak. What do you mean the Wei family suffered a setback? If it weren't for the disciplinary officer, Chu Xiu would have been crippled by our Wei family. Since Lord Disciplinary Officer has spoken to settle this matter, my Wei family naturally couldn't be bothered to refute Lord Disciplinary Officer's request. Thus, we reluctantly moved to another location to continue our business. Otherwise, do you think my Wei family would so easily hand over our business to Chu Xiu? Although Wei Chen was a bit of a playboy and his reputation in the Wei family wasn't good, as a Wei family disciple, Wei Chen still knew that everything he had came from the Wei family. Therefore, Wei Chen was very protective of the Wei family's reputation outside. No one could slander it. Han Mu smiled and said, Brother Wei, everyone knows that your Wei family is powerful in the Guanxi. You don't need to emphasize this point again. However, Chu Xiu is really ruthless. They heard that he had first killed the 5 heroes of the River East in Eastern Qi, and then killed those who had wanted to avenge the 5 heroes of the River East. Finally, he had even killed a great master at the unity of heaven and man realm. TSK, that was really something. I heard that after he returned to the Guanzhong torture room, he even dared to talk back to the disciplinary officer Yin Batong in public. It's easy to imagine what Master Wei is thinking. In my opinion, the Guanxi region might belong to someone else in the future. Who knows, it might even be Chu Xiu's. Han Mu's Han family didn't have any conflicts with Chu Xiu. After Chu Xiu took over the Qinzhou prefecture's business, the Han family was one of the first to choose to side with him. They were very adaptable, so he didn't have any ill feelings towards Chu Xiu. However, Wei Chen sneered disdainfully and said, You think you're invincible just because you killed a few people outside? What a joke. My Wei family has been in the Guanzhong torture room for hundreds of years. Who does that Chu Xiu think he is? How dare he challenge my Wei family? Ridiculous. Rumors are just rumors. If a unity of heaven expert was so easy to kill, how could someone in that realm be called a great expert? For Chu Xiu to be able to win, it's either because he played some tricks, or because his opponent was too useless. Wei Chen hadn't met Chu Xiu before, but that didn't hide his hatred and malice towards Chu Xiu. Just as Wei Chen was about to say something, a figure stood in front of him. Wei Chen was just about to scold when that figure pressed a palm onto the table. A scarlet-red palm force exploded like a violent flame, and it actually burned the entire table into ashes in an instant. The person who suddenly stood out was Huanu. If Wei Chen and the others were here to vent their grievances, it would have been fine. After all, Jianghu constables weren't Imperial Secret Service, and didn't need to inquire about everything. However, the problem was that Wei Chen dared to insult Chu Xiu. This was something Huanu couldn't tolerate. Now that Huanu's strength had reached the physical invulnerability realm, his palm energy was even more condensed. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Is official Chu someone you can insult? Huanu said coldly as he looked at Wei Chen. Wei Chen and the others were so frightened that they immediately ran away. Wei Chen pointed at Huanu and said coldly, Who are you? Tell me your name. Huanu came out to relax today. Naturally, he wouldn't be wearing the Guanzhong torture room uniform. That was why Wei Chen and the others didn't recognize him. As for Han Mu, he was a local power in Qinzhou Prefecture. During this period of time, Huanu had been hanging around Qinzhou Prefecture. He recognized Huanu and knew his temper and character. Huanu was definitely a ruthless person. When he went crazy, he would even hit himself. Don't be fooled by Huanu's harmless and indifferent appearance. When he really flared up, he dared to kill anyone. Chapter 324. Slandering Chu Xiu in public only to be caught red-handed by one of his subordinates, Wei Chen felt a little awkward. However, in his opinion, he hadn't done anything too overboard. All he did was scold Chu Xiu a few times. What was the big deal? Moreover, Wei Chen had never thought that the Wei family had backed down in front of Chu Xiu. He truly believed that the Wei family had only backed down to give Wei Jiuduan face. Thinking of this, Wei Chen's courage grew. He sneered and said, You're one of Chu Xiu's subordinates? What does Chu Xiu think he's the hall master of the Guangzhong torture room? I can't even scold him anymore? This is the Chenzhou prefecture, not Chu Xiu's Jianzhou prefecture. Seeing Wei Chen's stubborn appearance, Han Mu and the others subconsciously took a few steps back, distancing themselves from Wei Chen. Of course they could scold Chu Xiu, and there were many people who scolded Chu Xiu in the Jianghu. But the problem was that even if they scolded him, it didn't matter if they scolded him in secret, but if they pointed at Chu Xiu's nose and scolded him to his face, they would be courting death. Although Wei Chen hadn't scolded Chu Xiu to his face, Chu Xiu's subordinates had heard it. Moreover, it was a fire slave who was loyal to Chu Xiu. This matter was probably not going to end well. The fire slave's eyes revealed a cold glint. His loyalty to Chu Xiu was built on the premise that Chu Xiu had given him so many things. At the same time, if he wanted to protect his current position and everything else, he had to display his ability. Wei Chen had insulted Chu Xiu in front of him. If he let this matter go, he would feel sorry for his current position. You want to scold official Chu? Fine, I'll take you back to the Jianzhou prefecture and let you scold him to your heart's content in front of official Chu. As soon as he finished speaking, the fire slave directly grabbed at Wei Chen. But at this moment, a sword light suddenly fell and blocked the fire slave's path. Wei Chen's eyes lit up. Uncle Li, save me. Suddenly, a middle-aged warrior appeared in front of Wei Chen with a sword in hand. He was a guest of the Wei family, and had the strength of a physical invulnerability expert. He had been specially sent to protect Wei Chen. He was furious that Wei Chen didn't know what was good for him. It was one thing for him to cause trouble in the Wei family, but he didn't even keep his mouth shut outside. However, he was still a direct descendant of the Wei family. If something happened to him, Wei Chen would also suffer. Therefore, Uncle Li cupped his hands and said, Lord Fire Slave, this child is insensible and has offended Lord Chu Xiu. Please forgive him. Is there a need to make such a big fuss over such a small matter? This brat always came to the Chen State Prefecture to drink with women. My lord once said that people must be responsible for their words and actions. He insulted my lord in front of me. This is not a small matter. Didn't you say that he doesn't know? Fine, hand him to me and let me bring him back to the Jianzhou Prefecture. I will teach him a lesson, and let him know how to be sensible. Uncle Li's expression changed when he heard the fire slave's words. If Wei Chen was brought back by the fire slave, he would probably lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. Uncle Li said in a low voice, Lord Fire Lord, are you really not giving my Wei family any face? The fire slave's expression instantly changed from smiling to disdain. He spat and said disdainfully, Your Wei family has no face at all. Didn't your family head Wei Moat come to find trouble with my lord? What happened in the end? In the end, he still left with his tail between his legs. Uncle Li frowned. He didn't expect Chu Xiu's underlings to not give the Wei family any face. Young Master Chen, you leave first. I will cover you. In this situation, they had no choice but to fight. Uncle Li turned around and instructed Wei Chen, preparing to have him retreat first. But at this moment the fire slave sneered. Leave? None of you can leave. As soon as he finished speaking, the fire slave took the initiative to attack. His body was like a swimming fish, inexplicably strange. Almost in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Uncle Li. Uncle Li also didn't expect the fire slave to be so fast. He subconsciously slashed with the long sword in his hand. A few feet long sword energy danced in the air, trying to stop the fire slave. But when he saw the strength of Uncle Li's earth energy, the fire slave sneered in his heart. This guy looked much older than him. He should have stepped into the physical invulnerability stage many years ago. But when he attacked, the sword energy didn't even reach 10 feet. He was simply trash. The fire slave's palm fell. The red earth energy wasn't released, but condensed in his palm. He actually used the earth energy of his palm to resist Uncle Li's sword energy. With a loud explosion, Uncle Li's sword blasted the fire slave several steps away. However, the long sword in his hand instantly turned red. A strange and evil fire power seeped into Uncle Li's body and burned his meridians. He immediately groaned in pain, and his complexion changed dramatically. At this time, The fire slave rushed forward again, and formed a seal with both hands. The fire chi in Uncle Lee's body seemed to have a life of its own. While it was burning his meridians, it actually brought along his blood chi. When he was sent flying by the fire slave's palm, the fire chi in his body directly returned to the fire slave's body, and took away a part of his blood chi. This caused Uncle Lee's complexion to turn deathly pale. The fire slave's cultivation method was inherited from a tribe in the western region. It wasn't considered a demonic cultivation method, but it was extremely evil. When the fire energy seeped into the opponent's body, as long as it wasn't completely consumed by the opponent, it could be retracted. It also carried a part of the opponent's chi and blood. It could be said that the more it fought, the stronger it became. After a few moves, Uncle Lee was already seriously injured. At this moment, Wei Chen hadn't reached the door yet. He was already out of time. Uncle Lee struggled to stand up, but his eyes were already filled with shock. It was understandable that Chu Xiu had the strength to crush those of the same level. But how could his subordinate be so strong? He had just stepped into the physical invulnerability stage, and already had such powerful combat strength? What he didn't know was that the fire slave was from the Blue Dragon Society. It was different from him, who wasn't young but could only be a guest in a small family. Although the assassins from the Blue Dragon Society didn't have the highest realm among those of the same age, their combat strength was higher than most people of the same realm. After all, the Blue Dragon Society trained to kill. If you didn't have the strength to fight multiple people of the same level, why would you be an assassin? You would just be waiting to be killed. I told you none of you can escape today. The fire slave didn't care about Uncle Lee, who was already seriously injured. Instead, he turned around and grabbed Wei Chun, who was about to leave the restaurant. Just as he was about to grab Wei Chun, Jiang Taoran, the inspector of the Chun State Prefecture, suddenly appeared and slammed his palm against the fire slave. The powerful palm force sent the fire slave flying, but Jiang Taoran just casually waved his hand to expel the evil fire from the fire slave's palm force. There was still a huge gap between the three-flower realm and the physical invulnerability stage. The fire slave wasn't Chu Xiu, who dared to fight with people 1 or 2 levels higher than him at any time. Looking at Jiang Taoran, the fire slave said coldly, "Sir Jiang, what do you mean? Do you want to protect this guy who dared to slander official Chu?" Jiang Taoran frowned and said, "This is the Chun State Prefecture's territory. Fire slave, give me some face and let this matter go. If you want to fight, can't you fight somewhere else?" As the inspector of the Chun State Prefecture, Jiang Taoran naturally knew that the fight had begun in the restaurant. In fact, he had already rushed over when he heard that Wei Chen was in conflict with the fire slave. Who knew that when he arrived, Jiang Taoran realized that the situation was more troublesome than he had imagined. The fire slave's attitude was tougher than he had imagined. He didn't want to provoke the Nine Plains Wei family, and he didn't want to provoke Chu Xiu either. As long as these two didn't fight in the Chun State Prefecture, everything would be fine. The fire slave said with a warm smile, "Of course, I have to give face to Sir Jiang. I won't kill him. I just need to bring Wei Chen back." Jiang Taoran's face immediately darkened. This fire slave still wants to kill? He coldly snorted and said, "Fire slave, don't play word games with me. You know what I mean. Once we leave the Chun State Prefecture, you can do whatever you want as long as you don't fight in my territory." The fire slave slowly said, "Once we leave the Chun State Prefecture, they will all return to the Wei family. If I let them run away, I won't have the face to continue working under official Chu. Not killing this guy is already giving face to Sir Jiang. I must bring Wei Chen back today." The fire slave's attitude was surprisingly tough. At this moment, Wei Chen also knew that he was afraid. He stood behind Jiang Taoran and trembled, hoping that Jiang Taoran could help him stop the fire slave. Jiang Taoran frowned and was about to say something when he heard the fire slave's cold voice. "Lord Jiang, you're an inspector, so I'll give you face. If you don't come forward, I'll break his sword and behead him. Now, I will give you face, but I hope that Sir Jiang won't embarrass me. I am just a constable and naturally don't dare to challenge Sir Jiang. However, if I can't bring him back today, then when my master comes out of seclusion, I will report to Sir Jiang and have Sir Jiang discuss this personally." The fire slave's threatening tone immediately made Jiang Taoran's face turn red with anger. A constable from the Jiang who actually dared to speak to him like this? However, Jiang Taoran was a person who could endure and adapt to circumstances. He could now see that the distance between him and Chu Xiu had been completely widened. There was no comparison at all. Moreover, Chu Xiu's murderous nature made him a little afraid. Compared to offending the Wei family, he was more afraid of offending Chu Xiu. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Jiang Taoran could only coldly snort and say, "When Official Chu comes out of seclusion, I will ask Official Chu if he knows that his subordinate is so powerful." After saying this, Jiang Taoran directly turned around and left, leaving behind a dumbfounded Wei Chun. The fire slave still had a faint smile on his face. He wasn't afraid that Jiang Taoran would go to Chu Xiu and complain about him because the fire slave knew Chu Xiu's personality. This person was very protective of his people. Chapter 325. However, it was Chu Xiu's subordinates who had captured him. Even if Wei Dongming was an idiot, he knew the difference between him and Chu Xiu. So Wei Dongming pulled Uncle Li along and said, "Let's go. Come with me to see the patriarch, and ask him to save Chun." However, Wei Mok was still a little unhappy that Wei Dongming had come looking for him. Fire Slave and the others looked at each other. The Wei family had acted quite quickly. They had just asked for Chun back, and the other party had come to ask for him. Wei Dongming was in his 60s and had the strength of the Three-Flower Realm. He was a direct elder of the Wei family. In terms of seniority, he was one generation older than the current patriarch Wei Mok. However, Wei Dongming was currently in a rage. The more he refuted, the angrier Wei Dongming became. This idiot! Hearing Ghost Hand King's words, Fire Slave was relieved. He immediately called for a Jianghu constable and threw Wei Chun to him. He told him to teach this guy a lesson in the dark dungeon, and let him know that a loose tongue can cause trouble. Chu Xiu was protective, and so was the Wei family. Ghost Hand King stroked his beard and said, "So what if he's a direct descendant?" Sir said himself that the Wei family is nothing to worry about, so don't worry. If he dares to insult Sir, throw him into the black prison and let someone teach him a lesson. Whether he lives or dies will be decided after Sir comes out of seclusion. He had given birth to Wei Chun at an old age, so he doted on him. This caused Wei Chun to have a personality that did not know the severity of the situation. He was indeed a guest of the Wei family, but he was also a person who needed to die. He had seen Fire Slave's strength and knew that he dared to kill people. He was sure that if he dared to act recklessly, Fire Slave would definitely kill him. However, at this time, Wei Dongming showed a smile that was uglier than crying. If the Wei family's token was useful, I would have used it long ago. Chun, or would not have been taken away by others. At this time, in the Jianzhou Prefecture Inspector Hall, Fire Slave carried Wei Chun back to the main hall. However, as soon as he entered, he found Tang Ye, Yan Bugui, Wolf King, and the others were all there. But at this time, someone outside reported that Wei Chongling had arrived. Wei Mok didn't wait for Wei Dongming to speak as he waved his hand and said, "All right, you don't have to say anything more. No matter who Wei Chun offends, you just need to step forward and show the Wei family's name to resolve the matter. But when Wei Chun comes back, lock him up for me. As a disciple of the Wei family, it's fine if he's not strong enough, but he's always causing trouble for the Wei family. This kind of disciple should be taught a lesson." Wei Mok thought about it and suddenly said, "You just said that this matter was decided by Chu Xiu's subordinate, Fire Slave, and that Chu Xiu didn't participate in it?" The Ghost Hand Monarch said sinisterly, "Lord Wei is very awe-inspiring. You even dare to come to my Jianzhou prefecture to ask for someone. If Official Chu wasn't in seclusion right now, I reckon that Lord Wei wouldn't even dare to step through the doors of my Jianzhou Prefecture Inspector Hall, right? It's true that we captured him, and he's locked up in the Black Prison. But he dared to insult Official Chu. Without Official Chu's permission, no one can take this person away." Wei Chun was the most troublemaker among the younger generation of the Wei family. Wei Mok had already cleaned up after him several times. But the problem was that Wei Chun had offended Chu Xiu. This caused Wei Dongming, who had just received the news, to immediately panic. What? Chu Xiu? After Fire Slave left, Uncle Li stamped his feet and returned to the Wei family first to inform the elder of the Wei family, Wei Dongming, who was Wei Chen's father. Normally, their branches were scattered throughout Guanxi. When they needed to report some miscellaneous matters, they would return to the main hall. But they would never gather together like this. Wei Dongming hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare. Patriarch, please calm down. The Black Prison was a place where the patrol hall temporarily locked up criminals and thieves. However, there were very few people here. Fire Slave slapped his head. He had been too carefree during this period of time, and had really forgotten about this. Wei Mok cursed inwardly. This Wei Chen's mouth had no filter. Sooner or later, he would die because of this mouth of his. Ghost Hand King smiled and said, Tomorrow is the day of salary distribution. If you don't take action actively, shouldn't you be more active in receiving your salary? He pointed at Uncle Li and yelled, What did I tell you? I told you to follow Chun'er at all times. But in the end you just watched him cause trouble. Wei Dongming hurriedly said, Patriarch, you've misunderstood. No matter how willful Chun'er is, he wouldn't dare to act presumptuously in Chu Xiu's territory. This time's matter was purely an accident. It was also Chu Xiu's subordinates who were too overbearing. It's Chu Xiu. Therefore, Uncle Li could only watch as Fire Slave took Wei Chen away. He didn't dare to say a word. Wei Mok snorted coldly and said, What else do you want? Do you want me to take action personally, or have the great ancestor take action before you're satisfied? Will you only be satisfied if the entire Wei family is sacrificed for your precious son? But now that Chu Xiu was in seclusion, there was only a group of ordinary Jianghu constables in the Jianzhou Constabulary Hall. There wasn't even a three-flower realm martial artist. Wei Chongling also had confidence. Since the last time he fought with Chu Xiu and lost the upper hand to Chu Xiu, Wei Mok seemed to have been provoked, and spent most of his time in seclusion. Jiang Tao retreated. Wei Chen, who was isolated and helpless, was captured by Fire Slave. He wanted to break free but was knocked unconscious by the Fire Slave's qi. If this was an ordinary time, Wei Chen would have no problem doing this. He could protect the entire Guanxi Wei family. Wei Chongling was an inspector of Guanxi. With Chu Xiu in seclusion, there was no one in the Jianzhou Constabulary Hall who could stop Wei Chongling. As he spoke, Wei Dongming pulled Uncle Li to Wei Mok's seclusion place. Uncle Li could leave, but if he left now, he would be offending the Wei family. Unless he didn't want to stay in Guanzhong anymore, he would not have a good ending if he offended the Wei family. Wei Chen's mouth was on him. What could he do? Could it be that he wouldn't let Wei Chen speak at all? The Fire Slave was not an idiot. Although he had brought Wei Chen, he didn't really attack along the way. He was worried that it would affect Chu Xiu. Seeing that the person was Wei Dongming, Wei Mok couldn't help but frown. What's going on? Who did Wei Chen offend? Wei Chongling was a collateral relative of the Wei family. Although he was also at the Three-Flower Realm, Wei Dongming still looked down on him. If other people or forces touched his son, Wei Dongming, as an elder of the Wei family, could make the other party release Wei Chongling and apologize with a word. The other people in the Wei family knew that Wei Mok liked to be quiet. Therefore, when he was in seclusion, they would try not to disturb him. Now that the door to his seclusion place was being knocked, could something big have happened? Wei Dongming nodded. This must be the Fire Slave's personal decision. The Fire Slave had said it himself. Moreover, Chu Xiu was in seclusion now. Everyone in Guanxi knew this. Uncle Li opened his mouth but didn't say anything. Uncle Li, who was already seriously injured, wanted to intervene when he saw this scene, but he forced himself to stop. When Wei Mok opened the door, he saw Wei Dongming say with bloodshot eyes, Patriarch, please save Chen. After a while, Wei Mok finally said, Since Chu Xiu doesn't know about it, then it's much easier. Right now, our relationship with Chu Xiu is a bit sensitive. Our Wei family is not ready to officially fall out with him. Since it's his men who captured Wei Chongling, let's let Wei Chongling go. He is now the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. As long as Chu Xiu doesn't show up, he still has some advantage over the constables under Chu Xiu. At this time, the Ghost Hand King saw Wei Chen in the Fire Slave's hand. He couldn't help but ask curiously, Who is this guy in your hand? Wei Chongling walked into the hall aggressively. He looked around and said coldly, "Where's Wei Chun? Hand him over." He was in seclusion right now, but Wei Dongming had come to interrupt his seclusion for his son. This really didn't know what was important. This made Wei Mok unhappy. Wei Dongming was getting more and more muddle-headed as he grew older. Wei Mok's expression immediately changed when the door to the seclusion room was knocked. Wei Mok frowned and said, "He dares to ignore the Wei family. Who did Wei Chen offend? The Yuan continent's Zhang family?" He couldn't help but say in surprise, "What day is it today? Why are you all back?" Wei Mok couldn't be bothered to waste words with this guy. He sent someone to inform Wei Chongling, and then went into seclusion again. Because after the criminals were caught, as long as the evidence was conclusive, they would be executed immediately. So they couldn't stay long in the black prison. If Chu Xiu was here, Wei Chongling wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Fire Slave threw Wei Chen to the ground and said, "An idiot disciple of the Wei family insulted Darren in front of me. I brought him back to teach him a lesson. This guy seems to be a direct descendant of the Wei family, and has special people to protect him. Ghost Hand King, take a look. Will there be any problems that will affect Darren?" Wei Mok's expression changed and he shouted, "What did I say before I went into seclusion? I told you not to provoke Chu Xiu, not to provoke Chu Xiu. When the time is right, you will naturally be able to take care of Chu Xiu. But your precious son dared to go to the Jianzhou government to find trouble with Chu Xiu. Is he tired of living?" As he spoke, Wei Dongming let Uncle Li, who was behind him, tell him everything that had happened. He did not exaggerate or embellish the story. No matter who was right or wrong, his own disciple had been captured by the other to be taught a lesson. If the Wei family didn't even have the slightest reaction, then their reputation in the Guanxi region would plummet. Seeing that Uncle Li didn't speak, Wei Dongming vented some of his anger. But then he became slightly anxious. Wei Dongming said hesitantly, "Wei Chongling? Can he do it?" But cursing was cursing. Wei Chen would definitely save him because of his face. Chapter 326. This was not the first time Wei Chongling had suffered at the hands of Chu Xiu. Just as the Ghost Hand King had said, if Chu Xiu was not in seclusion, he might not even have the courage to step into the Jianzhou government hall. But the problem was that Chu Xiu was in seclusion right now and would not come out for a while. What did he have to fear? Wei Chongling looked at the Ghost Hand King and snorted. "You do not know the hierarchy. Did Chu Xiu teach you like this?" Also, even if Wei Chen cursed Chu Xiu, he did it in the Chenzhou government, not your Jianzhou government. You Chu Xiu's subordinates are so domineering. You want to meddle in the affairs of other prefectures? Then is the torturer of this Guanxi region Lord Wei Jiuduan, or Chu Xiu? The Ghost Hand King sneered. Wei Chongling thought that they were so arrogant that they wanted to play word games with them. In terms of strength, the Ghost Hand King was not as strong as Wei Chongling, but he was experienced. He did not waste words with Wei Chongling and said coolly, "Official Wei, please return. I only have one thing here. We will not hand over the person. If you want the person, wait for Official Chu to come out of seclusion and talk to him. If Official Chu says we will hand over, we will hand over." A cold light flashed in Wei Chongling's eyes. "Not handing over? I will take the person away today. I want to see who dares to stop me." As he finished speaking, more than a dozen martial practitioners surged in from outside the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. These were the people Wei Chongling had brought. But when they heard the noise, Du Guangzhong and the others led their people to surround Wei Chongling in the center with vigilant expressions. There were two groups of people under Chu Xiu's command. One group was the Jianghu constables who had been the Jianzhou inspector like Du Guangzhong. The other group were assassins from the Blue Dragon Society. These two groups were of different origins and had completely different personalities. While there had never been any conflict or enmity in the past, they had always disliked each other. However, now that someone had come to cause trouble, their little conflict was nothing. They could directly unite against the enemy. Wei Chongling sneered and said, "Your hearts are very united. But do you think you are Chu Xiu? Do you think you can look down on a three-flower realm martial artist like me?" As he finished speaking, Wei Changling took a step forward. Powerful energy exploded around him. The cold and dark energy covered the entire hall. Changling was not afraid of acting in Jianzhou. In any case, he had reason and evidence. Logically speaking, the fire slave was in the wrong in this matter. Capturing people from across worlds would make Chu Xiu's side seem domineering. So Wei Changling was right to ask for people. Right now Chu Xiu had not appeared. He was the inspector, and the others were just ordinary Jianghu constables. If he acted, he was helping Chu Xiu teach his subordinates a lesson. If the Ghost Hand King and the others attacked him, then they did not know their place. But according to Chu Xiu's personality, he was never reasonable. If Chu Xiu came out of seclusion after this, he would most likely come to make trouble for him. But Wei Changling had confidence. Wei Mok had sent him here. The Wei family would naturally stand behind him. It was the same for Wei Jiuduan. He had long since heard that Wei Jiuduan had a falling out with Chu Xiu. Now that he was in the right in this matter, it was obvious who Wei Jiuduan would help. Wei Changling said coldly, "I will give you one last chance. Will you hand over the people or not?" The Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "Sir Wei seems to have made up your mind? Tanya, Yen Bugui, I leave this to you too." As soon as he finished speaking, Ghost Hand King immediately retreated. Tanya and Yen Bugui, one lazily and the other slowly stood up. The lazy one was Tanya, and the slow one was Yen Bugui. Both of them used to be the gold medal assassins of the Heavenly Sin branch. After joining Chu Xiu's team, they didn't really fight seriously. They spent most of their time cultivating in seclusion. At this time, they had already reached the peak of the physical invulnerability realm. They were only half a step away from the three-flower realm. The Ghost Hand King knew their strength. There was no need to disturb Wei Changling. The two of them were enough to deal with him. Tanya toyed with the dragon tail soul-chasing dart in his hand, a lazy smile on his face as he said, "We naturally can't compare to the Lord, but unfortunately, you don't even have the qualifications to compare to the Lord." Yen Bugui did not speak. He could not be bothered to speak. He took off the heavy sword on his back and dragged it on the ground. Wei Changling laughed in anger and said, Good, arrogant enough. Today, I will teach you what it means to respect your superiors." As he spoke, the long sword in Wei Changling's hand was covered in thick icicle energy. It stabbed towards Tanya with deep coldness. Tanya did not attack, but Yen Bugui's heavy sword was raised. When he had been in the Blue Dragon Society, he and Tanya had carried out many missions together. The two had great teamwork. Now that they were working together, so what if he was at the Three-Flower Realm? They also had the confidence to kill Wei Changling. Yen Bugui's sword move was the pinnacle of power. His sword path was even more extreme than Cheng Buhui, who had been killed by Chu Xiu. He had given up everything to pursue extreme violence and power. Misty Gang Qi condensed on the blade of the heavy sword. It was not released, but his sword seemed to carry the weight of thousands of kilograms. When it came crashing down, there was a violent sonic boom in the air. The heavy sword and long sword collided. In front of that extreme power, Wei Changling's sword energy shattered. While he had negated the power, his right hand still felt numb, and his eyes showed shock. Where did this monster come from? Three-Flower Realm martial artists were strong because they had formed the three flowers above their heads. Their mind, energy, and spirit became one, and their control over their energy greatly increased. Their explosive power far surpassed physical invulnerability realm martial artists. But right now, Yen Bugui had not even stepped into the Three-Flower Realm. His sword strike contained this level of power. He was not weaker than him. No, in terms of pure power, Yen Bugui was stronger than him. At the moment when Yen Bugui made his move, Tanya also made his move. Tanya's attack was much more beautiful and violent than Yen Bugui's. In that moment, a string of golden light appeared in his hand. It was a dozen or so dragon tail soul-chasing darts connected head to tail, slashing towards Wei Changling with sharp energy. The dragon tail soul-chasing darts seemed to have a life of their own under Tanya's control. They changed trajectories within the half-dragon and stabbed towards Wei Changling's major meridians. Wei Changling snorted coldly. The sword in his hand changed directions. The dense ice energy was like a snowstorm that sent the dragon tail soul-chasing darts flying. But at the same time, Yen Bugue's heavy sword attacked with the weight of Mount Tai. This simple attack was even more powerful than before. Tangya's figure floated behind Wei Chongling like a willow catkin. His body twisted in the air. In a flash, countless cold lights exploded. These were tiny silver needles. They fell like a torrential rain of pear flowers. They were dazzling, but also extremely dangerous. Only the heavens knew if Tangya had put poison in the silver needles. Wei Chongling did not dare to underestimate them. He could only explode with all the energy in his body to block. But Tangya's attack had sealed off all possible places for him to dodge. He could only take Yen Bugue's blow head-on. With a loud explosion, Wei Chongling was thrown back several steps by Yen Bugue's blow. His face suddenly paled. But then an abnormal flush of red appeared on his face. But he suppressed it. Looking at Tangya and Yen Bugue, a hint of shock flashed through Wei Chongling's eyes. Where did Chu Xiu find these two monsters? Yen Bugue's sword move was heavy, violent and savage, violent to the extreme. On the other hand, Tangya's movement technique and concealed weapons were incomparably strange and sinister. With the two of them working together, Tangya had used an endless stream of hidden weapons to seal off the space around him while assisting Yen Bugue, forcing him to fight back head-on. He was a martial artist at the Three-Flower Realm. Yet he had almost been cut by Yen Bugue's sword to the point of vomiting blood. But before Wei Chongling could react, Tangya and Yen Bugue once again pressed forward. But this time, the two had reversed, with Yen Bugue as support and Tangya as the main. Yen Bugue's sword presence forced Wei Chongling to not dare to face it head-on. Tangya switched to his two daggers and fought close to Wei Chongling. His vicious fighting style forced Wei Chongling into a corner. Wei Chongling suddenly shouted angrily. Ice appeared on the long sword in his hand. His blood merged into it. The icy blue sword aura faintly showed a strange blood color. The storm-like sword aura slashed out and collided with Yen Bugue's sword. With a loud bang, Yen Bugue was thrown back dozens of feet, his heavy sword almost flying out of his hand. Wei Chongling was at the Three-Flower Realm, and had the advantage in explosive power. At this moment, he had unleashed the power of his chi and blood. In terms of strength, he had already overwhelmed Yen Bugue. But at this time, the hilts of Tangya's two short blades faced each other, and formed a spinning blade. They immediately gave off a blinding golden light, and slashed towards Wei Chongling, who had just unleashed his full power. At the same time, Tangya's energy exploded. He threw out countless hidden weapons in that moment. Soul-chasing nails, plum-flower darts, bone-piercing needles, hand-flick arrows, a string of innumerable hidden weapons flew towards Wei Chongling. There was no order at all. There was only one word, many. Only the heavens knew how Tangya had hidden so many hidden weapons on him. At this time, half of the hall was filled with Tangya's hidden weapons. Tangya's face was slightly pale after releasing so many hidden weapons in an instant. But within the cover of the hidden weapons, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Wei Chongling used almost all of his energy to barely neutralize the hidden weapons. This caused him to sigh in relief. But at this time, the whirling blade that Tangya had first thrown out flew out of nowhere, and cut Wei Chongling's longsword in half. It narrowly cut across Wei Chongling's arm. Blood sprayed and it almost cut off his entire right arm. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.